Morin Dutton. The unsolved murder of Morin Dutton in 1961 is perhaps one of Liverpool's most shocking and gruesome cold cases. Morin was just 27 at the time of her death and was a typical English housewife. Her husband, Brian, was a research chemist who worked for the Imperial Chemical Industry Company, often shortened to the ICI. Just 3 weeks earlier, Morin had given birth to the couple's second child. They already had a 2-year-old, a little boy named David. By all accounts, the couple had a happy marriage and lived a normal life, which is perhaps why Morin's murder was all the more disturbing and shocking to the local community. On December 21, 1961, Morin stayed home all day at the couple's house on Thingwall Lane in the area of Nottingham. She had intended on taking David to visit the nearby Childwall Parish Church, that she didn't want to take Andrew as it was cold and foggy out. So she called her mother-in-law, Elsie, and asked her to babysit later that day. However, Elsie had to cancel the arrangement because the fog had gotten so thick she was unable to traverse it. And so Morin's plans were abandoned and she stayed home with her children. She was last known to be alive at around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon. Just after 6 p.m., Brian returned home from work and was immediately suspicious when he was greeted with both darkness and silence. With 2 young children, the house was never quiet. Morin was always bustling about, carrying out household tasks while caring for her 2 young boys. Brian's suspicions grew when he saw the family's half-eaten lunch still on the kitchen table. He moved through to the living room, and it was there he found his family. In the middle of the room was Morin. She'd been stabbed 14 times in the chest, throat, and back. It is widely believed that David, who was sitting nearby, dazed and gazing at his mother, witnessed the crime. Andrew was in his crib nearby. The children were thought to have been alone for the best part of 6 hours. Investigators at the Old Swan police station immediately launched an inquiry into the horrific slaying of the mother of 2. They believed a long-bladed knife was the murder weapon, and searched nearby bushes and shrubs for any sign of the object. They even searched drains on the streets, but turned up nothing. There was no obvious forensic evidence available. Morin had not been sexually assaulted, and there was no signs of forced entry, nor had anything been taken from the home, all of which made it difficult for authorities to pinpoint the motive. After carrying out door-to-door inquiries, police discovered that nobody had been seen coming or going from the home, and nobody had heard screaming or a struggle. Then a young woman came forward with an interesting story. After seeing the newspaper report of Morin's death, the young woman who lived in nearby Halewood told authorities that she had been visited by a young man who claimed to be a doctor. Like Morin, the young woman had recently given birth. She assumed that the doctor had been sent to check on her as part of her postnatal care, but this was not the case. After her husband returned from work, she told him that the doctor had indecently assaulted her, which prompted her husband to make inquiries about the so-called doctor. He was told that there was no doctor operating in the area at that time. The man was described as being between the ages of 27 and 30, wearing horn-rimmed glasses and a dark gray overcoat. On the back of this information, police theorized that Morin had let the killer into her home under the belief that he was some kind of professional, like a doctor or a nurse. Perhaps the 27-year-old had fought back when he tried to sexually assault her, and the culprit flew into a rage and attacked her with the knife. Another strange possible suspect in the case was that of the, quote, good-looking stranger. This man was described as being rather young and wearing a leather jacket. He was seen several times in the vicinity of the street on the day of the crime. Witnesses saw him running very fast down the road that afternoon, and not long afterwards, he was seen being violently sick outside of the Courthay Methodist Church. One onlooker noted that the man kept his hands in his pocket the entire time he was vomiting, which they thought was very peculiar. One woman claimed they'd seen the man on the day of the incident. He had knocked on her door and stood before her clapping his hands. Frightened, the woman slammed the door on him and locked it. By January 17th, the police had gathered over 20,000 statements. With the help of witnesses, they put together a composite image of what they thought the man might have looked like. The Liverpool Echo featured the picture on the front of their paper, and within the first 24 hours of it being published, 60 people contacted authorities with information. However, the names that were given to the police were steadily eliminated, and the man in the leather jacket was never identified. The next suspect in the case was a young blonde woman who was seen acting suspiciously when she boarded a bus close to the crime scene. This unidentified woman boarded the number 10D bus on East Prescott Road. She reportedly had an Irish accent and muttered about how she needed to leave the city immediately. Upon exiting the bus, she repeatedly said, "Oh my God, the woman has never been traced and never come forward." The most bizarre theory to ever be explored in Morin's case was done so by investigators acting under the orders of Deputy Chief Constable of Liverpool, a man named Herbert Barmer. He theorized that the 27-year-old housewife had been executed in a sacrificial killing by a Polynesian cult. Several of the cult's followers lived in Liverpool, and it was believed that they were making sacrifices to their god Tiki during the winter solstice, the time period in which Morin was slain. The members were also known to have a tattoo of a reversed swastika. Whether this theory holds any weight at all is unknown, but it is what the Deputy Chief Constable believed. Eventually, authorities landed on a suspect by following this theory. A 24-year-old nurse living in Upper Parliament Street was arrested and charged for stealing equipment and drugs from 3 Liverpool hospitals in 1962. He reportedly pretended to be a doctor and had the reversed swastika tattoo. However, the man was subsequently ruled out as being involved with the murder of Morin, and the entire theory was abandoned. Authorities regularly review the files and evidence in Morin's case and made a fresh appeal for information as recently as 2016. Despite authorities uncovering numerous compelling suspects, Morin's case remains unsolved. If the culprit is still alive today, it's likely they are at least in their 70s, meaning it is unlikely authorities will be able to bring them to justice. Lyn Bryant. At the time of her passing in 1998, Lyn Bryant was a mother of 2 who'd been planning her 41st birthday celebrations. Although her case received tremendous amounts of media attention at the time, it has all but disappeared from the minds of the public today. Described by her loved ones as popular, sociable, and family-oriented, Lyn was well-liked and well-known by locals in the village where she lived, Ruan Highlands in South Cornwall. She had 2 daughters, 19-year-old Erin and 21-year-old Lee, who just had her own first child. The 10-month-old baby was Lyn's first grandchild, and she was looking forward to seeing her family continue to grow in the future. On the morning of Tuesday, October 20, 1998, Lyn went to work as usual. She was a cleaner for a nearby house. Upon finishing, the 40-year-old dropped in to visit her parents before returning home. At around 12:45 p.m., Lyn drove her gray Ford Sierra to Harris Garage at the village of Tregony, but she found out they were out of fuel. Next, she drove to Chenoweth Garage at Ruanghai Lanes, where she bought milk, gas, and a few groceries. While there, a scruffy white car-derived van was seen entering the forecourt. It was driven by an unknown bearded man. Law enforcement later noted that a similar vehicle had been seen in the days before Lyn's death, but both it and the driver were unknown to locals in the area. After visiting the garage, Lyn had lunch with her daughter Erin. The pair chatted about Lyn's upcoming birthday and watched Emmerdale between 1 and 1:30 p.m. Just after 1:30, the 40-year-old took the family dog, a lurcher named Jay, out for a walk. Her family told authorities that Lyn always took the same route. Several witnesses reported seeing her on her way and told law enforcement later that nothing seemed amiss. A passing motorist saw Lyn talking to a man at the junction by Ruan High Lanes Methodist Chapel. The man is described as being clean-shaven in his 30s, about 5'9", and wearing light-colored clothing. This is the last known sighting of Lyn alive. At 12:30 p.m., Lyn's body was found by a woman driving up the lane between the chapel and Travails Manor. Panicked, the woman reversed her car back down the road and alerted a local farmer who recognized the body. While emergency services were called, by the time the air ambulance arrived at 2:50 p.m., Lyn was long dead. She had sustained multiple knife wounds to her neck and back, with the fatal blow striking her in the chest. Authorities noted that the 40-year-old had fought her attacker viciously, and that her clothing was disturbed, which led them to believe she had been the victim of a sexually motivated assault. Law enforcement determined that the murder weapon was a single-edged blade between 10 and 14 centimeters long. It was likely either a penknife or a small kitchen knife, but so far it has never been located, despite the fact that police immediately carried out a fingertip search of the area after Lyn's body was found. One interesting clue found at the scene was the vivid blue polyester cotton mixed fibers that were located on Lyn's body. The fibers have never been matched to a specific garment, but are commonly used in both polo shirts and sweatshirts. They are alien to Lyn and her home, leading investigators to conclude that they must have come from the perpetrator. Authorities also stated that due to the struggle and the mud splatter found on the 40-year-old's clothing, they believe the culprit would have mud and blood on their clothing. Another local farmer told the police that he'd seen a man walking across his field between 2:45 and 3 p.m. This was unusual to him because there was no footpath across the area and it was never used by walkers. He noted that the man wasn't dressed for a walk or a hike either, wearing regular, everyday clothing instead. Another bizarre incident that occurred in Lyn's case was that of her tortoise-shell glasses, which she had been wearing when she left the house earlier, but were not found on or with her body. They also did not turn up when the police searched the area. 4 months later, however, on February 2nd of 1999, the glasses were located, sitting on top of the murder at the gateway where the mother of two's body was found. Authorities have been unable to determine where they came from, suspecting that either a member of the public found them or that the perpetrator of the crime had taken them as a trophy and for some reason returned them afterwards. The investigation into Lyn's horrific murder was long. 3,144 house-to-house inquiry forms were completed. 1,600 alibis were established. 7,884 statements were taken, and 6,573 vehicles were traced and eliminated. All men between the ages of 14 and 70 who were living in a 1-mile radius of the crime scene were traced and their alibis checked and corroborated. Due to the remote location of the crime scene, authorities concluded that the culprit was either a local to the area or knew it well. Perhaps they worked nearby or had family who lived in the community. In 2015, investigators who were reviewing the case managed to pull a partial DNA profile from the evidence. Although DNA samples had been taken in 1998, authorities had to begin the process all over again with some 6,000 people in 2016. This was because new legislation, which had come into effect 3 years earlier, had compelled law enforcement to destroy the old samples. So far, however, these efforts have not led to an arrest or a conviction, although 3 suspects were cleared using the DNA profile. In 2018, on the 20th anniversary of Lyn's death, authorities put out a fresh appeal for information, which led them to receive 160 calls. 27 new leads involving 13 people came as a result. That same year, a reconstruction of the 40-year-old's last known movements was made and released to the public. The 3 men police wish to speak to have never come forward or been identified. These men include the man seen driving the white car-derived van, the man who spoke with Lyn at the chapel, and the man who was witnessed walking across the field. It's unknown if any of them have anything to do with the crime. In 2016, a former intelligence officer named Chris Clark put forward the theory that Lyn's case is linked with that of Helen Fleet and Kate Bushill, both of whom were murdered while dog walking. Kate Bushill was just 14 years old when she was found dead in Exwick, Exeter on November 15, 1997. She had been out walking the neighbor's dog when she was found. She had a knife wound to the neck. Helen Fleet was 66 years old when she was beaten to death while walking her dogs on March 28 of 1987 in Walbury Woods in Weston-super-Mare. Both cases have never been solved and law enforcement has never officially linked the 3 murders. Lyn Bryant's case also remains unsolved. Amy Ayres, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, and Eliza Thomas. All heartfelt, nature-loving teenagers were wonderful and immeasurable young girls from Austin, Texas. Their undying friendship and shared passion for all living things was cut short by unsolved murders in the waning hours of December 6, 1991, leaving all who knew them across the Texas capital and the entire state at large grasping for answers in a sea of evidence that drowned us all in doubt. As a hope to provide more substantial reasoning built upon observable evidence and situational analysis, this is an examination of the 1991 Austin yogurt shop murders and the horrifying tragedy left in the I Can't Believe It's yogurt storeroom. The youngest of the four girls was Amy Liers. Born on the final day of January in the winter of 1978. She was quickly introduced into the ranching culture and cowgirl lifestyle that the open plains of Texas can inspire. From a young age, she became obsessed with the outdoors and all that Mother Nature had to offer, finding a special affinity for animals and associating with them in her free time. Her two major interests were fishing and horses, falling in love with competition shows. As young as 3 years old, Amy excelled in horse shows across the state of Texas. She even learned the art of cutting horses, in which a horse and its rider attempt to separate a cow from its herd and keep it singled out. It was a fine equestrian skill to master, let alone for a young girl. In short, Amy was born to be a horse whisperer. These deep-rooted passions carried on into her adolescent years as well. When she wasn't hanging around the horse barn, she was training her dogs new tricks or making friends with strangers' pets, withholding the uncanny ability to attract animals on the fly, as if her energy and spirit made them draw near. She took this spirit wherever she went, whether it was to the rodeo to support her brother, Sean, or to her meetings with the fellow yearbook staff at Burnett Middle School. After classes ended, Amy would venture to Lanier High School's Junior Future Farmers of America, where she served as vice president, or to the Travis County Livestock Show, where she would show hogs and join arts and crafts programs. It was all prep for her master plan, as Amy dreamt of one day owning horses on open farmland while tending to animals as a veterinarian. With so much natural talents, we can be sure that these dreams would have materialized had it not been for that fateful final journey to the yogurt shop with a friend in late 1991. The next youngest victim, Amy Ayers, a aforementioned best friend, was 15-year-old Sarah Harbison. Born on October 28, 1976, Sarah was the younger of two daughters belonging to stepfather Frank and birth mother, Barbara Harbison. In 1979, Barbara and her daughters moved to Austin, and Sarah never looked back. Much like her future best friend, Amy, Sarah displayed a love for outdoor activities and wielded a competitive spirit at an early age. She loved playing sports, especially basketball. She just loved being a part of something and forcing herself to be better at whatever she set her mind on. Sarah never slowed down either, taking on as many activities as she could. Alongside basketball, Sarah also joined the cheerleading squad and would cheer directly after her own basketball game, supporting the boys' teams too. When she got into high school, she also excelled on the freshman volleyball squad too. This hectic lifestyle didn't bother Mr. and Mrs. Harbison though, as they pushed Sarah to achieve greatness and follow her passions. Thus, Sarah joined other organizations at school, such as the Lanier FFA chapter, and became a representative on her high school student council. But her very favorite extracurricular activity, showing sheep at local county fair competitions, was shared with her older sister, Jennifer, another victim of the yogurt shop mystery. Jennifer Harbison, the eldest child of Barbara Harbison, was born on May 9, 1974, 2.5 years prior to Sarah. She, her mother, and her sister had an inseparable bond growing up. In 1980, Barbara married Frank, and the family of 3 grew to 4, cemented with true happiness and consistent support. Through this support, Jennifer was much like her younger sister in that she was encouraged to live up to her imaginations. She was short and petite, quick and clever, but equally as confident and athletic. She loved to remain social at school, also channeling most of her energy into sports and the Future Farmers of America program, where she served as president of the local chapter and vice president of the district. She led the sports fandom between her and Sarah, playing t-ball as a youngster before becoming a stellar track and field star in high school. She used her athletic abilities to ready herself for a future career in rodeo barrel races, the perfect dream for a girl with her interests. Without a doubt, she and Sarah held many similarities in their close relationship, their mother describing them as wonderfully unique, faithful, and most of all, mature for their age. It was Jennifer's maturity that prodded Barbara to allow her to work part-time late-night shifts at a minimum wage job at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop so she could help pay for a navy blue Chevy S10 truck her birth father was wrangling for her. In a heartbreaking twist, it was this innocent plan that led into darkness after a few months on the job for Jennifer and her older co-worker, Eliza Thomas. Eliza Thomas was born on May 16, 1974 in Travis County, Texas. Her parents divorced when she was only a child, but she remained tight-knit with her birth mother, Maria, and grew up with her younger sister, Sonora Thomas. Like many of her friends and fellow Mid-Texas natives, Eliza was fond of country music and dancing. When she became a teenager, Eliza and her best friend at the time, Michelle, would go out together to dance events. Maria Thomas would tell reporter Dick Ellis after the murders that her favorite memories of her late daughter were the times when Eliza and Michelle would meet up before or after dancing, get dressed up with nice clothes and makeup, and laugh through the homemade photo shoots. It was this youthful ritual that inspired Eliza to dream of becoming a model someday, with her expertise in beauty products a facet of her career goals. When she wasn't collecting tubes of lipstick, she was looking for the newest little knickknacks to add to her miniature collection, mostly made up of cats figurines. Much like her friends, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy, she too loved animals and the Future Farmers of America program. In fact, she used these activities to support her modeling aspirations, selling the pigs she'd show at county competitions to fund her first modeling portfolio. It was also a big reason why she also got a job as the night shift closer at the local yogurt shop. And sadly, why she passed away far too soon, along with the 3 other innocent girls of Austin, Texas in December of 1991. Let's now turn to the timeline of events leading up to the Austin yogurt shop murders. At around 4:30 p.m. on Friday, December 6, 1991, Barbara Harbison returns home from work to find her youngest daughter, Sarah Harbison, sitting on the couch, eating a snack. Sarah informs her mother that she's going out that night with her friend, Amy Ayers, and asks if Amy can spend the night with them. Barbara agrees and tells Sarah she and Amy can get a ride from her eldest daughter, Jennifer Harbison, to a mall near Jennifer's work and then a ride home after her shift ends. A few minutes later, Jennifer returns home from school to prep for work. Her mother and sister tell her of their plan, and she happily agrees. Sometime after 5 p.m., Jennifer and Sarah depart the Harbison household for the Austin shopping complex, the last time Barbara sees her children. Jennifer drops off Sarah and Amy at the mall and clocks in for the closing shift at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop at 2949 W. Anderson Lane with her co-worker, Eliza Thomas. Over the next 4 hours or so, the night shift at the yogurt shop operates as usual. At around 10 p.m., customers at the store report seeing all the girls inside, happy and acting normally. This would be the last confirmed time that Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy are seen alive. Sometime within the next hour and 47 minutes, assumed to be around 11 p.m., the 4 friends are entrapped at the yogurt store by multiple assailants. The offenders gag, sexually assault, and eventually murder the girls in cold blood via gunshots to the head with .22 caliber lead bullets. They stack the bodies in the shop's storeroom, pour accelerants around the crime scene, light it all on fire, and escape into the thick of night. At exactly 11:47 p.m. the same night, Austin police officer Troy Gay patrols the Anderson Line, North Austin area. He spots a fire burning at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop and calls it into his dispatcher. Austin police backup arrive on the scene, and just after midnight on Saturday, December 7th, authorities discover the dead bodies of Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy. Eliza and Sarah are found with their wrists tied, with Jennifer's unbound, but her hands positioned behind her back. Their corpses are nude and charred almost beyond recognition. Amy's body is found in another section of the store, a sock-like cloth tied around her neck, with second-degree burns on about 30% of her body. It's theorized the bodies were stacked on top of each other, with Amy escaping the pile and crawling away before being shot once more. All the girls are presumed to have died before being burned. A few days later, on Monday, December 9th, law enforcement confirms reports that there were multiple people involved in the robbery-turned-homicide, and there were no signs of forced entry, and that the items used to tie up the 4 girls were all found in the store that night. The following day on Tuesday, December 10th, the city of Austin, Texas grieves with the various parents over the loss of their 4 children. A funeral is held and it is attended by over 1,500 citizens. On Thursday, December 12th, State District Judge John Wisser sealed the autopsy reports to sustain the evidence's confidentiality and protect the investigation. At North Cross Mall on Saturday, December 14th, a man by the name of Maurice Pierce is arrested for possession of a .22 caliber gun and bullets. Austin Police Detective Hector Polanco brings him into question in regards to the yogurt shop murders. And Pierce eventually tells the detective that his friend, Forrest Wellborn, used a .22 gun in the 4 girls' murders. Despite this development, police report that they have few leads on December 23rd. After a false confession by an anonymous teenage girl and her boyfriend are proven untrue. To make matters worse, the Maurice Pierce tip is buried in case files after the interrogating officer, Detective Polanco, is removed from the investigation due to his dirty past in coercing false confessions from suspects on March 23, 1992. 7 months later, in October 1992, the next best lead evaporates when Pavirio Villa Saavedra, a suspect that Mexican police say confessed to his involvement, recants his testimony, telling American authorities that Mexican federal agents tortured him into coercion. Over the next 3 to 4 years, leads pour into the Austin police departments, but no arrests are made, and the yogurt shop murders quickly begin to devolve into a tragic, cold case. However, sometime at the end of 1996 or the beginning of 1997, APD Detective Paul Johnson is newly assigned to tackle the murders and pulls the old Maurice Pierce tip case file for closer inspection. The testimony isn't acted upon until early 1999 when forensic officers test Pierce's .22 caliber gun against the crime scene evidence. They find it does not match the weapon used at the yogurt shop. Nevertheless, police bring in one of Maurice Pierce's alleged cohorts, Michael Scott, multiple times between September 9 and 14, 1999. After over 20 hours of intense interrogations, Scott confesses to playing a role in the murders. On September 15, Austin police travel to Charleston, West Virginia, where they interview another alleged cohort, Robert Burns Springsteen IV. Springsteen is interrogated under scrutiny for 5 hours, before admitting to raping Amy Ayers and helping kill the others. A couple of weeks later, on October 5, 1999, Austin Judge Mike Lynch signed the arrest warrants for Scott, Springsteen, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. They are officially arrested the following day, on October 6, for capital murder. Later that year, on December 1st, police collect the 4 suspects' blood and DNA samples for crime scene analysis. 8 days later, on December 9th, another judge rules Pierce and Wellborn will be tried as adults, despite being just 15 and 16. On December 14th, Robert Springsteen is indicted by a grand jury, followed by Michael Scott and Maurice Pierce on December 28th. District Attorney Ronnie Earl says he will seek the death penalty for both Springsteen and Scott. In another twist though, a different judge dismisses the capital murder charge against Forrest Wellborn on June 30, 2000, after a second jury fails to indict him. Despite the lack of physical evidence against him, prosecutors continue with their case against Robert Springsteen in April of 2001. At the conclusion of the trial, the jury finds Springsteen guilty of murder. And in June of 2001, Springsteen is sentenced to death. 16 months pass by. And a similar conclusion to Michael Scott's trial is reached when he's found guilty of murder on September 22, 2002, and sentenced to life in prison on September 24. However, a few months later, on January 28, 2003, District Attorney Ronnie Earl asked for a dismissal of the charges against Maurice Pierce, claiming there wasn't enough evidence to convict him in the moment, and Pierce is released after spending over 3 years in prison. It wouldn't be until 3 years later, on May 30, 2006, when the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Springsteen's conviction, claiming that the written confession of Michael Scott was improperly used against Springsteen in his own testimony. This exact same reasoning is used again on June 6, 2007, when the court overturned Scott's conviction as well. In a bombshell announcement by prosecutors in the spring of 2008, they report that advances in DNA technology have revealed that a previous piece of undetected DNA from an unknown male subject was discovered on a vaginal swab taken from Amy Yes' body. This DNA profile does not match any of the 4 original suspects. This same DNA profile is found on the body of one of the Harbison sisters in June of 2009 and matches none. Of the over 100 suspects the police have looked into thus far, nor any of the forensic officers or medical personnel who had dealt with the corpses in the years since December 1991. Later that month, on June 24, 2009, the DA's office tells a Travis County judge that they are no longer prepared for a retrial against Michael Scott or Robert Springsteen without the identity of the man to whom the new DNA belongs. At 2:50 p.m., the two men walk out of the courthouse with their attorneys, finally free men. In October of 2009, all charges are officially dropped against Scott and Springsteen. In the 11-plus years since the wrongful arrests of Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Michael Scott, and Robert Springsteen, and almost 19 years since the tragic assaults and murders of Amy Ayers, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, and Eliza Thomas, no matches of the DNA samples found at the yogurt crime scene have been announced, and there are currently no known active leads in the investigation. Without a doubt, the biggest piece of evidence discovered in the yogurt shop murder investigation is the mysterious DNA profile belonging to an unidentified male, found on 2 of the 4 bodies after DNA technology expanded at the turn of the millennium. While not much is known about the sample outside of the gender of its donor, it's been announced that the profile does not match any of the tested suspects police have compiled since their manhunt began. Nor does it match hundreds of associates of the prime suspects listed by the Austin Police Department thus far. Technicians have been ruled out, fellow law enforcement officers have been ruled out, the first responders have been ruled out. This means the DNA most certainly belongs to one of the men responsible for these harrowing acts of rape and murder. As we await the results of further testing and for a match to be uncovered, another set of points to the case are critical in understanding how hurtful the authorities were in their brutal mishandling of suspects early on and how the deception of the police may have derailed the entire investigation through their despicable use of coercion and eliciting false confessions. Had Detective Hector Polanco not intimidated Maurice Pierce into claiming his .22 caliber gun was the one used in the homicides by his friend, Forrest Wellborn, investigators would never have followed up this false lead and would never have arrested 2 innocent men along with their supposed cohorts, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. Instead, they could have focused their time, money, and energies into finding a viable suspect. Police and prosecutors alike knew the 4 men had no physical connection to the yogurt shop, as well as having the knowledge that Pierce's gun wasn't the murder weapon. So to cover up their ineptitude, they turned to the bad cop routine. It is a tale we have seen far too often. If you want a better idea of how detectives coerced false confessions from 4 young boys, hampering the search for true justice and destroying 4 more innocent lives in the process, you can listen to clips of these coerced confessions by following the link in the show notes. You'll hear audio clips from the elongated interrogations, full of persuasive tactics utilized by cops who want pleas of guilt to spill out of the tired minds of innocent people. Mike, look at me. You're remembering what happened this city room time there, right? I don't. You're remembering what happened. I don't honestly remember going in the toilet. Imagine being an underage boy brought in by police officers for a crime you didn't commit. Cornered in a windowless, low-lit room by men twice your size, demanding you say what they want to hear, bullying images into your malleable minds, forcing false memories upon you. Is that the gun you walked up behind somebody with and shot in the head? Not only that, but the officers used each man's false confession against the other, tricking them into believing that their friend was right, and to deny it would be to deny the other's seemingly true story. It's a crippling, debilitating sensation and one that took precious years away from a proper investigation into finding the real killers. The Austin Police Department and Travis County Prosecutor's Office should be ashamed to the highest degree and must take the blame. Their rush to create answers where there obviously were none cost the victims' families the justice they deserved. It is inexcusable and disgusting behavior, yet vital to understand in grasping the entire picture of the failed and fractured yogurt shop case files. We can now turn to the most prominent theories surrounding the mystery of the Austin yogurt shop murders. The wildest part about the yogurt shop murders and its notoriety for the coerced confessions is that it didn't stop with the 4 main suspects believed to be responsible for years until DNA cleared their names. In fact, investigators heard over 50 false confessions related to the case, including one from infamous serial killer Kenneth Allen McDuff. McDuff's testimony coming the day of his execution was at first seriously considered by police when they realized he was in the Austin area around the time of the yogurt shop massacre, murdering Colleen Reed with accomplice Alva Hank Worley on December 29th. At 1991. However, after exhaustive investigative measures were taken, it was found that these claims by McDuff were false, a disturbing trend for a case lacking more and more clarity by the day. So why did so many people come forward with fake motives and lead authorities astray, distracting everyone from the real culprit still running free? For some like McDuff, it was perfect fodder to receive their twisted 15 minutes of fame. These instigators deserve absolutely no recognition and should not be named, as their falsifications take away from the serious matter at hand. For others, false confessions might have come from further malpractices taken by Austin police and case detectives, who had the previously mentioned history in pulling the trigger on coercion. If the four boys were manipulated into confessing for the case to be fast-tracked to the solved folder, it's not out of the realm of possibility that others were subjected to similar tactics. Again, it goes without saying these awful investigative patterns damaged the case, and the police who took them were criminals in their own right. So while the police were wasting time putting figurative and even literal guns to the heads of innocent parties, what other theories were discussed among case followers and armchair sleuths? The craziest and most ill-advised theory was purported in court by the prosecutor's office after Pierce, Wellborn, Scott, and Springsteen were cleared by DNA evidence. They claimed that they still believed the four men were guilty, but that a mysterious fifth cohort was the donor of the DNA profile. This theory was nothing but a desperate attempt by APD and the district attorney to save face in an obviously bungled prosecution effort that shouldn't be considered further as anything but a coward's last attempt to frame four innocent men. Another string of theories discussed across the message boards and email chains revolved around possible serial killer suspects. After Kenneth McDuff was ruled out, sleuths started pointing out other murderers with similar MOs. The most frequently mentioned was Paul Dennis Reed, also known as the fast food killer, convicted of 7 murders over a string of 3 fast food chain robberies from February to April of 1997. Reed killed his victims in a similar fashion to the yogurt shop murderer, bringing them to the building store room, binding them at the wrists, and shooting them in the head, execution style. While these slayings happened in Nashville, Tennessee, Reed had a criminal history in Texas, dating all the way back to 1983, getting out of prison for an armed robbery charge in 1990. However, because Reed was eventually apprehended, his DNA records would have been entered into a criminal database and subsequently ruled out as a match to the yogurt shop murders. Reed also operated alone and dealt with mental disabilities according to his family, going against yogurt shop crime scene evidence that there were multiple offenders who were likely skilled criminals operating with precision. These data points also most likely rule out involvement of the gunman in the Lyn Bryant shooting mystery that took place on February 22, 2008. Despite the vast amount of time between the Lyn Bryant case and the yogurt shop case, it's hard for people to ignore the similarities in crime scenes. The Lyn Bryant shootings also involved all female victims who were executed via gunshots to the head after being trapped in the back of their store. Ultimately, there was one victim who survived and told police that the gunman was working alone. And for a case that took place in Illinois, 1,000 miles away and 17 years apart from the yogurt shop case, a link between the two is highly improbable. Of all the theories put forth by the community surrounding the case, there is one hypothesis that stands out from the rest, an idea about who the killers might be built from a couple of eyewitness testimonies gathered by the consumers at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop the night of the massacre. These statements place 2 unidentified men sitting at a booth after 10 p.m., coming across as odd and emitting a peculiar aura. The first man was described as white, standing at around 5 feet 6 inches in his late 20s or early 30s, sporting dirty blonde hair and a large black jacket. The second figure was described as much bigger, a 6-foot white male of average build with darker hair and an elongated pointy nose, sporting a green military fatigue-type jacket. He spoke with a deep, yet crystal-clear voice. The first customer to speak out against the 2 men was Darrell Croft, who testified for defense lawyers in Michael Scott's criminal trial in 2002. Croft, a former police officer and security manager in 1991, had visited the Austin yogurt shop at just about 10 p.m. on December 6 with two friends. He recollected how when he went to go stand in line, a man wearing a green military fatigue jacket matching the description of the second man was loitering, asking other customers to go in front of him so he'd be at the back of the line. When he approached Croft, he actually asked him if he was a former cop and if he'd jump ahead of him in line. Croft denied his bizarre request and monitored the man as he made his way to the counter and ordered a soft drink. Once he paid for the beverage, the man then slinked around the counter and walked into the back of the store. Croft, growing more and more suspicious, asked Eliza Thomas, who was working the cash register, why the man was allowed back there. She informed Croft that the man had asked to use their restroom, and she gave him permission, acting as the shift supervisor. But Croft couldn't shake the strangeness of the incident and waited around the front counter for a few minutes longer than normal, waiting to see if the man in the green jacket returned. When he failed to show up, Croft left the store with his friends, but reported the description of the man to the police a few days after the murders were reported on. For reasons unknown, a police sketch of the man in the military jacket was never procured, and Croft failed to pick a recognizable face out of a couple of suspect lineups in the aftermath, lineups that included the four innocent boys. The other major testimony regarding the two men was pulled from old police statements by the Austin Chronicle for a story published by reporter Jordan Smith in December of 2011. These statements came from a female customer who told police she and her husband were two of the last customers at the yogurt shop just before closing at 11 p.m. on the night of December 6th. They reported seeing the same two jacketed men sitting in a booth acting in a way that made the woman's skin crawl. She watched them in the reflection of the shop's front window as the girls began to close up the shop by refilling napkin holders, cleaning floors, and flipping chairs on top of tables. Even as the couple left, the two men remained in their seats, acting as if they weren't going anywhere soon as Jennifer Harbison locked the door and flipped the sign to read closed, as to dissuade any new customers from entering. The girls inside acted normally, but according to the couple, the men, it did not. It's hard not to find these shared experiences rather intriguing. These two men have not been named or cleared by authorities. For all we know, they were never tracked down by police nor interviewed. Law enforcement has stated that they are interested in speaking to the two men, but as witnesses rather than suspects. However, considering their uncomfortable vibes and peculiar behavior, those who consider them suspects have good reason to do so. In one of the crime scene photographs taken the morning after the murders, you can see a booth in the background of the dining area that has an empty napkin dispenser and cleared tabletop. When customers were shown the photo, they agreed it was likely the booth the two suspicious men sat at. This means that the murders happened in between the men leaving and the girls being able to finish up closing their booth. A very slim amount of time, considering they were in the middle of clearing the tables. Thus, if the two men aren't responsible, they at least had the best shot at spotting the real killers, making the mystery of the unidentified male closing customers the most puzzling and important of all. Before we divulge our hypothesis of the 1991 Austin yogurt shop unsolved murders, we want to make it known our conclusions presented in Cold Case Detective are purely logical speculation based on evidence, circumstance, and factual subtext. We are only privy to the same information presented in each video, and we do not attempt to promise certainty or an expert guarantee on the findings we reach in closing. We simply observe, research, and report. For starters, we believe that these murders were indeed the actions of multiple assailants or a killer with at least one other accomplice. The evidence hides in the simple fact it would be next to impossible for a single perpetrator to subdue all four girls by themselves, take them to the back storeroom, tie them up, and set the entire place on fire without causing a ruckus. There are two key pieces of data to support this. Remember, none of the neighboring businesses at the strip mall where the yogurt shop was located reported hearing anything to suggest murder the night of December 6th. One business did say they heard a few popping noises, most likely the gunshots, but nobody heard screaming or shouting or banging or anything to suggest a desperate fight was put up. If there were multiple offenders, keeping everything quiet would have been a much easier task. The young girls, friends, and families agree with this, stating that their courage and tough murder personalities would be too much for one person with one gun to overcome. Secondly, we are confident that these murders were orchestrated by career criminals and likely sociopaths who were seeking to attack women with the resources to do so without detection. These horrific crimes were not carried out by high school boys attempting to rob the neighborhood yogurt stand. Rather, they were premeditated acts of violence, people who sought to harm and strike fear in their victims. The reason the killings are more than likely not a simple robbery gone wrong is the presence of an accelerant around the storeroom after the fire was put out. Most criminals do not bring lighter fluid along with their robberies, usually seeking to run in and out of their target and leave without physical conflict. Plus, there were plenty of other shops around the area that would have provided much more cash than the yogurt shop did. No, we believe these murders were intentional from the beginning. It is highly possible that the men who murdered the girls were watching one of them from afar. Maybe even prior to December 6th, they could have made Amy and Sarah targets after spotting them at the mall without parental supervision, a popular spot for offenders to track unsuspecting women. While there is no evidence to suggest this, it cannot be ruled out when considering these killers were concise in how they acted and the history of violence against young women in general. So who could the killers be? While it is impossible to know for sure, we believe those two jacketed men previously mentioned are the most fitting suspects. They were acting suspiciously, bothersome to multiple customers, and were the only two of over 50 customers that evening that have yet to be accounted for. Not only that, but the story by Daryl Croft leaves us wondering if that tall man in the green jacket wasn't just going back to use the restroom, but rather scoping the shop for cameras or worse, a place to commit a future assault. They were the last two people seen with the girls and wearing clothes that could have concealed weapons. Of course, this is all circumstantial evidence. However, it is also curious that the two men who were lurking in the booth at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop on December 6th have not come forward to absolve themselves of any further suspicion. They could have effortlessly cleared their names and identities through science, submitting DNA to be compared to the sample obtained by police. Until that happens, they are the greatest suspects we have and must be found to unlock further answers regarding the entire mystery. Until then, we must keep the faith that the DNA profile currently held in evidence can be used to help aid investigators. Sadly, the type of DNA sample received, a YSTR strand, also known as mitochondrial DNA, isn't the kind one can simply input into a genealogy database and connect it to relatives. While it can rule out suspects when compared with direct DNA donations, it's hard to be used as a backwards investigative tool, like the DNA was used for cases in the Golden State Killer investigation. Not only this, but the FBI has withheld the DNA sample from such genealogy studies anyway, claiming privacy laws to be complicating its potential use in further DNA campaigns. Still, we will hold out hope that a breakthrough is just around the corner. And in the meantime, we will celebrate the lives of Amy Ayers, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, and Eliza Thomas. We will champion their unique personalities, shared passions, and their unparalleled drive to be nothing but unapologetically themselves. We will spread the hope and happiness and heartfelt courage those four girls emanated in their daily lives, never missing an opportunity to inspire those around them. We will remember their athletic feats, their unmatched equestrian skill sets, their farming expertise, and their community-driven spirits. We will remind the world that these were four young women full of promise, navigating their mid-Texas neighborhoods so that one day they could move out to new pastures and shape the world at large for the better. The tragic rape and murder at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop on the night of December 6, 1991 will not be the defining legacies of Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza. Their legacies are defined by every positive and life-affirming moment before, defined by their love for both nature and humanity. This is a type of love that is not burned or broken, no matter the circumstances of their final moments. It is the reason their memory will never perish as we continue a search for their justice into the infinite night. Khadija Britton. Born April 22nd of 1994, Khadija Rose Britton was described by her loved ones as a bright and athletic teenager who was sure to go far in life. A member of the Round Valley Indian tribes of the Round Valley Reservation, Khadija grew up in Covillo, California, and was an accomplished student who was also the star of her high school basketball team. Her friends and classmates noted that she was popular and confident, with a strong sense of humor. Everyone was certain that as a young woman, she would break away from her hometown and go to college. But Khadija had that opportunity robbed of her in the early months of 2018. It was the night of February 7, 2018 that Khadija was last seen alive. 3 days passed before her family filed a missing person report after hearing nothing from her. It's not that her family were unconcerned. It was more that in the last few years, Khadija had begun to live an increasingly unpredictable lifestyle. Instead of leaving to go to community college after graduating high school in 2012, she began to fall in with the wrong crowd. It wasn't long before she'd become involved in abusing drugs. Her community was known to be suffering from both drug and alcohol issues. Through her substance abuse, Khadija got to know a man named Niji Tony Fallis IV, who was around 14 years her senior. Although she didn't know it right away, Fallis was bad news. He'd had far more than his fair share of brushes with the law and had been charged with numerous offenses, ranging from manufacturing meth to endangering the health of a child to domestic violence. He'd even had his children taken from his custody after keeping them in filthy, squalid conditions. However, he appeared to father more children after his stint in prison in San Joaquin County because shortly after he met Khadija, she was in charge of his children. She would do their laundry, cook their meals, and collect them from school. While friends and family were unimpressed by Khadija's choice of boyfriends, their complaints and concerns fell on deaf ears. On January 30, 2018, a hysterical, bleeding, and bruised Khadija turned up on the doorstep of the house belonging to her father, stepmother, and their children. She told the couple about how Fallis had beaten her with his fists before picking up a hammer. The next day, working with the tribe's domestic violence center, Khadija filed a restraining order against her boyfriend. She was also given money to replace the possessions she'd left behind at his home, including her clothes and phone. Ultimately, however, Fallis managed to dissuade or force the 23-year-old not to follow through with the charges against him. This is thought to have been because, given his criminal history, Fallis would have spent considerable time in jail had the charges been successful. However, that was not the end. After Khadija was reported missing on February 10, 2018, a witness came forward to police with a horrific story. On the night of her disappearance, Khadija was known to have been visiting a friend in the 23,000 block of Airport Road. The witness claimed that around midnight, Fallis, accompanied by his new girlfriend, a woman named Antonia, turned up at the house in a black Mercedes. Armed with a small pistol, Fallis went to the door of the house and demanded that Khadija come out and speak with him. After this, a physical altercation ensued, and Fallis began to chase his ex-girlfriend around the car, which was being driven by Antonia. Fallis managed to hit Khadija and shove her into the car, and the three drove off together. The 23-year-old was never seen since. 10 days later, in mid-February, Fallis was charged with multiple offenses in connection with the disappearance of Khadija, including assault, kidnapping, first-degree burglary, threats to commit a crime resulting in death or great bodily injury, attempted murder, and for being a felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition. However, Fallis pled not guilty and refused to cooperate with detectives who were investigating the vanishing of his ex-girlfriend. Several months later, in June of 2018, the police were forced to drop most of the charges due to a lack of evidence. Fallis' bail was reduced and he was released shortly afterwards, although he still faced the gun and ammunition possession charges. In August, Antonia was arrested for suspicion of harboring or concealing a wanted felon. A few months later, in October, Fallis pled no contest to the firearm charges, while his girlfriend pled no contest to being an accessory to a felony. Fallis, who was 37 at the time, was sentenced to 4 years in prison, while Antonia was sentenced to 18 months in prison and 18 months under supervision. She was also ordered to have no further contact with her boyfriend and was forced to spend 6 months in an inpatient drug rehabilitation program. Both detectives and Khadija's family believe that Fallis kills the 23-year-old on the night she was taken. The problem is they're unable to prove it without first finding her body. During the investigation, authorities questioned and arrested many of Fallis' associates. They also set up an anonymous tip line, and missing persons posters were plastered all across the surrounding counties. Meanwhile, friends and family did their best to raise awareness for Khadija's case on social media, including setting up a Facebook group. In 2019, a pond in Mendocino County was drained when cadaver dogs indicated that something was buried there. However, no human remains were found. Lieutenant Shannon Barney of the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office, who was also a member of the reservation, said in a 2018 article that he believed somebody knew what happened and where Khadija was, but they were keeping quiet, telling the press Democrats, quote, "Throughout the ages, tribal people have closed down, among their own, within their own little tribal system, for protection. That's part of the culture. We know there are people who know more than they're telling us, but we have not been able to break through that tribalism." In 2018, a $50,000 reward was made available. That reward was doubled in 2020 with the help of the FBI, who have been assisting in the investigation. Khadija's family continued to look for answers. In March of 2018, her father, Jerry, and one of her brothers searched for her in the snowy landscape of the Mendocino National Forest after receiving a tip. When their SUV got stuck, the pair continued on foot, but their efforts proved fruitless. Abandoned buildings and chicken coops have been investigated by Jerry, who takes a shovel when he goes out with him, so he can check out any shallow graves. Although the perpetrator in this case seems obvious, the family have still not received closure or justice. Khadija's body has still not been recovered, and it's likely that without it, Fallas will not be charged. The case is still open and active. Kiera Coles. Born September 24, 1992 to Joseph Coles and Karen Phillips, Kiera was the fourth of 5 children and appeared to have a relatively normal upbringing. As an adult, she was close to her mother. The pair spoke on a near-daily basis, and she was also very anxious to start her own family. Kiera often told her family and friends that as soon as she was financially stable, she wanted to have her first child. Shortly before her vanishing, she was on her way to having her perfect life. She had moved out to her own apartment on the south side of Chicago, Illinois, and she had purchased a new car. She had also recently found out that she was pregnant. Her baby was due in April of 2019. 26-year-old Kiera was working for the USPS at the time of her disappearance. According to some reports, she had been there since 2017. While other sources claim she'd been there about 3 years. According to her mother, Karen, Kiera had taken the 1st and 2nd of October 2018 off from work for personal reasons. She was due back on the 3rd. However, the 26-year-old never showed up to her shift. Instead, she called in sick. Between the 3rd and the 4th of October, Karen continued to call her daughter, who wasn't answering her phone. The calls were going straight to voicemail, leading Karen to believe that Kiera's phone must have been out of battery. She then asked Kiera's sibling to check her social media. Kiera hadn't posted there either. Beginning to grow concerned, Karen asked the Chicago Police Department to perform a welfare check on her daughter. Kiera's car was still parked outside her apartment block, but the young woman herself was missing. Initially, police didn't think much of Kiera's vanishing, believing it to be a non-suspicious case. But eventually they began to suspect foul play. Karen had last seen her daughter on the Sunday before she vanished, September 30th. The pair had spoken about Kiera's preparation for the baby and what milk was best to drink while she was pregnant. However, the case grew a little complicated when the 26-year-old sister claimed that she had last seen her on Monday the 1st after picking her up from work. This statement conflicted with Karen's testimony that her daughter had taken Monday the 1st and Tuesday the 2nd off from work. This information has never been fully clarified in subsequent reports on the disappearance. Upon investigating further, the case grew all the more complex when authorities found out that the father of Kiera's baby, Joshua Simmons, whom she'd been seeing for 5 years, actually already had a long-term girlfriend and several children. There are also some reports that he had a third girlfriend, although this is only mentioned in a few articles. Not only was Kiera pregnant, but Simmons' long-term girlfriend was also pregnant with their third child. Reportedly, both Kiera and the other girlfriend knew of one another. According to Karen, the pair did not get on, and Kiera had been banned from visiting Simmons at his house. It is unclear if the authorities ever spoke with Simmons. In early 2019, he was wanted for questioning in relation to Kiera's case. Reportedly, after the 26-year-old vanished, Simmons, his girlfriend, and their children moved out of state. They never participated in any searches for Kiera nor any vigils. NBC5 found Simmons living in Louisiana in 2021, but he failed to reply to any of their letters. Following her disappearance, investigators found CCTV footage from a neighbor's surveillance camera, which showed a woman resembling Kiera walking toward her car on the morning of October 3rd. The woman was possibly wearing a postal worker uniform, although this has been heavily debated. The woman appeared to spot something out of frame and walk towards it. She didn't appear fearful or hesitant as she passed by Kiera's car and disappeared from view. Her movements led some to speculate that she had seen someone she knew or a car she recognized and walked towards it. Over the years, this footage has been subject to much scrutiny. At first, the Coles believed that this was their missing loved one. Over time, however, they have changed their minds. Most notably, Karen came forward earlier this year to tell the media that she never believed the woman was Kiera, but that authorities had asked her to keep quiet about her suspicions. Karen explained that the woman's gait and the shape of her body did not match that of her daughter. She also added that she was only revealing this information now because the investigation had stalled and she felt she had nothing to lose. The USPS, for their part, also does not believe that the woman in the footage is Kiera, but another postal worker who was on that route that day. In February of 2021, Karen also revealed that another neighbor had come forward with CCTV footage from the night of October 2nd. The video showed Kiera and Simmons leaving her apartment in separate vehicles. Investigators told the media that they had also recovered surveillance images of the 26-year-old withdrawing $400 from her bank accounts before handing it over to Simmons. It's unclear if Kiera's bank account has been used in the years since she vanished. After Kiera disappeared, her phone, bag and lunchbox were recovered from her car. Meanwhile, her keys and purse were found in her apartment. Online sleuths have noted that the lunchbox being found in the car was odd, given that she had supposedly called in sick. This phone call has been a controversial part of the case online. Many armchair detectives have suggested that perhaps someone called in sick pretending to be the 26-year-old. Her family have been unable to confirm if the phone call was in her call log, as they have been unable to access her phone without her passcode. It's unknown why authorities haven't looked into this. The USPS worker who took Kiera's call is adamant that it was her. Authorities also searched Whistler Woods Forest Preserve in Riverdale after following some anonymous tips they'd received. While a few bones were discovered at the scene, it's unknown if they were animal or human. Many areas in and around Chicago were searched, but all to no avail. A reward of $50,000 was also set up, although it has yet to be claimed. Kiera's family are desperate to bring her home and hopefully meet her baby. Her father, Joseph, quit his job in Wisconsin and moved to Chicago following the disappearance. He has spoken frequently about the case online and to the media and has handed out flyers on the street. For a period of time, he lived in his car outside of Kiera's apartment block, determined to find answers. The 26-year-old's friends and co-workers also continue to tirelessly spread awareness of her case. Even today, Joseph continues to hold meetings to spread awareness about his daughter's disappearance. In 2020, he said that he believed Kiera was alive, but being held captive in a vacant home. He added that he believed authorities had not done enough to help bring her back. In July of 2020, law enforcement announced that the investigation was suspended because they had exhausted all leads. They have stated that they still suspect Kiera met with foul play, but have otherwise been tight-lipped. They told the media that they are looking for evidence to back up their theory and that they believe 2 or 3 people were involved with the 26-year-old's disappearance. In September of 2020, the Chicago Police Department told the Chicago Tribune that they were working with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service and the FBI to continue the search. They also noted that the case was not closed, and they'd be investigating any new evidence or tips they received. Although there isn't much in the way of evidence in Kiera's case, there is a lot of speculation online. The most common theory is that Joshua Simmons was involved in Kiera's disappearance, with some even suggesting that his girlfriend was also involved. Amateur sleuths came to this conclusion after noting the way the couple left Illinois in the aftermath of the vanishing. And that neither helped with the investigation or the search. Some have theorized that it was done out of jealousy, but others have proposed that neither half of the couple wanted anything to do with Kiera's baby, and so they sought to rid themselves of the problem. Karen has said that while she initially didn't believe that Simmons was capable of harming her daughter, his silence has caused her to think otherwise. Another theory that has been proposed in Kiera's case is that she left to start over, overwhelmed by all the changes in her life. However, her family don't believe that she would abandon everything she'd worked for, and they don't believe she wouldn't at least let them know she was okay. Others have speculated that Kiera was simply a victim of a local gang or was the target of a crime of opportunity. While Kiera's case is still open, the investigation has slowed down considerably in the last year. Connor and Sheila Dwyer. The sudden vanishing of a married couple from County Cork in 1991 has baffled both amateur detectives and local authorities alike. The bizarre disappearance occurred almost 30 years ago, but still there are no answers in this extremely cold case. Connor and Sheila Dwyer lived and worked in Fermoy, County Cork in 1991. Connor, 63, had previously been employed as a plumber and handyman, but had most recently taken up work as a chauffeur for a wealthy German businessman named Fritz Wolf, who was holidaying in a nearby village. According to reports, Connor was having the time of his life in this occupation, as it allowed him to drive the flashy cars he had been dreaming of owning since he was just a child. Their neighborhood was not the most affluent, meaning neighbors didn't miss the shiny Rolls-Royce that sometimes sat at the front of their house. It wasn't subtle, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. While Connor was in his element with his new career path, Sheila, 61, was a homemaker. The couple's two grown children had since left the nest, both choosing to move to England. But Sheila kept herself busy throughout the day with cooking, errand running, and other household tasks. Friends and neighbors noted that she was always well-dressed and made a consistent effort with her appearance. Nothing seemed to miss in the pair's life when they suddenly stopped answering their telephone and vanished one day from their home without a trace. Connor and Sheila were last seen attending a funeral at St. Patrick's Church in Fermoy on April 30, 1991. The church was just 100 meters from the couple's Chapel Hill home, and they made it back safely. That evening, Sheila spoke with one of her sisters on the phone. It is unclear when exactly the Dwyers vanished. The last time anyone spoke to the couple was on May 1st, when again, one of Sheila's sisters spoke to her on the phone, but subsequent calls to the residence went unanswered. There are conflicting reports about when the couple were reported missing. Some sources say May 19th, while others say May 22nd. Either way, it's clear there is a gap of around 3 weeks, in which the pair's movements are not accounted for. It's unclear why nobody reported the couple missing, not friends, nor family, nor neighbors during that time. One of the Dwyer's children, also named Connor, said he had last spoken to his parents on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. He reported that nothing had seen amiss with the couple. The Dwyers were finally reported missing when one of Sheila's sisters went to the home after failing to contact either half of the couple. She was met with a silent, empty house, and she alerted the local authorities. When the garda arrived on the scene, they immediately began to investigate. Nothing seemed out of place and nothing was missing. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The couple's personal belongings, including clothes and passports, were found in the home. A biscuit tin kept in the house still contained around €2,100. The only thing the garda couldn't locate was the couple themselves, and their car, a white Toyota with the registration plate 5797ZT. In the years since their disappearance, no trace of the Dwyers has ever been found. Their bank accounts have never been accessed, and their car has never been located. Since the River Blackwater runs through the town, authorities conducted an exhaustive search of the water and the surrounding countryside, all to no avail. Shortly after their vanishing, Interpol was alerted and ferry records were combed through for any sign of either the couple's car or their presence on any of the ships. But once again, this lead was a dead end and no sign of the Dwyers was found. Although there have been no confirmed sightings of the couple since 1991, several witnesses stepped forward in the years following their disappearance, claiming to have seen them alive and well. One local woman believed she had seen the pair in their car, stopped at a set of traffic lights in Fermoy, just shortly after the couple were thought to have vanished. There have also been different sightings in the cities of Dublin and Waterford. In 1993, the case was featured on an episode of Crime Call, the Irish equivalent to UK's Crime Watch programme. After seeing the show, a woman reported seeing the couple at Laudes Airport in France in June of 1991. She said that the man appeared suspicious because he wore a long trench coat and kept a constant careful eye on his wife while he went to grab a newspaper. She thought it seemed like he was worried the woman would talk to somebody else while she sat and waited for his return. She said when the man returned to his wife, he said something to her and they both left. The witness claimed that the couple both had Irish accents. At the time, she was unaware of the missing pair, and thus didn't report the sighting sooner. She added that she was later interviewed by authorities with one of Sheila's sisters and that apparently the clothing she described matched the clothing that was missing from the house, presumably the clothing the couple had worn when they went missing, as no other garments were reported as gone from the home. Another interesting sighting came that same year in 1993 when a witness recalled seeing the pair at a Munich airport. This conversation was particularly interesting to the Garter considering before his disappearance, Connor had been working for a German businessman. However, neither the Bavarian Police Department nor Interpol could confirm this sighting. Another unclear detail in the couple's case was whether or not Connor was working for Fritz Wolf at the time of his vanishing or if he had stopped, perhaps because Wolf had returned to Germany. If Connor was still under Wolf's employment when he went missing, why had Wolf not reported his driver as missing? In the year 2000, new information led authorities to search a lime quarry about 45 minutes from Fermoy. However, this search turned up no new leads. One of the most curious aspects of the case is that it is shrouded in rumor and hearsay. Reddit forum users have noticed their family's reluctance to discuss the case, while accusations range from Connor orchestrating a murder-suicide plot to the 63-year-old being involved accidentally in a drug-running business. One particularly interesting whisper involves Connor disappearing for several years back in the 1980s. It is unclear where this rumor started, and it is unknown why he left or returned if the rumor is true. It's also been speculated that the couple took their own lives together in a suicide pact. This theory arose because Connor's brother mentioned that he had suffered from depression before. If Connor really did disappear in the prior decade, then perhaps his mental health struggles played a role in that too. One theory in the case postulates that the couple's vanishing is linked to the disappearance of William Billy Fennessy, who vanished from Fermoy almost exactly a year prior. William was of a similar age and his car was also missing. However, his body and car were both pulled from the River Blackwater in 2013. The theory that appears to be the most likely is that the couple suffered the same tragic fate as William Fennessy, but their vehicle and bodies have simply not yet been found. The couple's more outspoken son, Connor, claimed in a 2008 interview that his parents had no enemies and were not disliked. They were friendly and respectable and well known in the community. He also noted his belief that they were still alive, but added, "I wonder what the hell was going through their minds. There's a void of information. It's very bizarre and inexplicable. It is a living nightmare." There have been very few updates in the couple's case in recent years. There have never been any suspects or theories announced to the public, and authorities have stated their belief that the couple's vehicle is likely the key to the case. Mary Boyle. If you're an Irish viewer, you are likely familiar with the name Mary Boyle. The missing 6-year-old's case is not only controversial, but also extremely tragic. Mary has been dubbed Ireland's Madelin McCann in recent years. Her vanishing is the longest-running missing child case in the Republic of Ireland. Born June 14th of 1970, Mary Boyle was a vibrant and talkative little girl. She had an older brother, Paddy, and a twin sister, Anne. Mary and were reportedly inseparable, with Mary being the boldest of the two. Although originally born in Birmingham, the young girl moved with her family to Ballyshannon in Ireland in the early 70s. Mary was last seen at around 3:30 p.m. on March 18, 1977. She was playing with her cousins and siblings near her grandparents' rural farm, which the family had been visiting since St. Patrick's Day on the 17th. While playing, the 6-year-old saw her uncle heading off with a ladder, which she was returning to a neighbor, and she decided to tag along. However, her journey was cut short when the two came across a large bog. Defeated, Mary turned back to return home. The trip should have lasted no more than 5 minutes. But the little girl never returned home. Mary's uncle stayed at the neighbor's farm for around 30 minutes, engaged in conversation with the occupants. Meanwhile, her family began to search for the 6-year-old, scouring the local area and questioning passers-by. In one article by the Irish Independent newspaper, a fisherman reported seeing Mary being snatched by somebody in a red Volkswagen Beetle. However, this witness apparently clarified his statement on a BBC podcast by stating that he had not seen Mary being taken, but he had seen a suspicious red vehicle in the area at the time. When the Garda arrived on the scene, they sprung into action, draining bogs in the area in an attempt to uncover her body. The lake behind Mary's grandparents' house was also drained, and authorities filmed a reconstruction of her last known movements using her twin sister and a famous Irish country music star named Margot O'Donnell, who was a friend and distant relative of the family, caught wind of the case and funded searches for Mary on the surrounding hillside by selling new music. Searches have been regularly carried out since 1977, but so far, Mary has never been located. Mary's case is extremely controversial. There are unclear details, conflicting reports, and allegations of corruption surrounding it. It is widely believed that a politician stops law enforcement from detaining and questioning a prime suspect in the case. Thus, it has never been solved. One of the loudest voices supporting this belief is a right-wing journalist named Gemma O'Doherty. O'Doherty is a determined journalist who has not only written about the case in publications, but has also created a documentary about the disappearance called Mary Boyle. The Untold Truth. The documentary is available to watch on YouTube, although O'Doherty herself was banned from the platform in 2019 for repeatedly violating YouTube's hate speech policies. O'Doherty is largely considered to be a controversial character herself. She's known to be a racist anti-vaxxer with anti-LGBTQ+ beliefs. Reportedly, her news-gathering ethics have also been called into question in the past. That said, her theory pertaining to Mary's case can't be entirely discredited, as there are several pieces of evidence supporting corruption and a cover-up. In her documentary, Gemma suggests the theory that Mary was sexually abused and murdered. Her sister and several other relatives have publicly claimed that they know what happened to the 6-year-old and they know who the culprit is. And supports O'Doherty's theory. And says the perpetrator is still alive and still living in the country. In the documentary, and can be heard saying, "I believe Mary had a secret. I believe Mary had to be killed to stop her telling." However, this claim has not come without a cost. And no longer speaks to her mother, and the Boyle family is largely divided as a result of their split beliefs. In 2016, the twins' mother also called the appeals the most ridiculous carry-on I have ever seen in my life. Margot O'Donnell recalled asking the politician, the one who allegedly stopped the interview with the prime suspect, if he had done such a thing. The politician denied any involvement and branded Margot a barefaced liar. The initial suspect was released without charge and does not appear to have ever been named in any newspaper reports. According to O'Donnell, the politician was not only friends with the suspect, but also had a good relationship with the superintendent who was in charge of the case. A detective sergeant named Aidan Murray has also confirmed that he was close to a confession from the prime suspect when a superior officer ordered him to rein it in. Murray added that he had also witnessed the call between the politician and law enforcement, which instructed the Garda not to question the suspect further. The politician who intervened in the Mary Boyle case is alleged to have been a man named Sean McKenneth, who passed away in 2017. When still alive, McKenneth was supposedly surrounded by accusations of sexual abuse and grooming. Mary's uncle, Jerry Gallagher, reportedly worked for him. Many believe that Jerry Gallagher is responsible for the disappearance of his niece. And Boyle has never outright accused her uncle, but armchair detectives have put two and two together. According to O'Doherty's documentary, Gallagher gave conflicting statements over the years and apparently didn't even admit that Mary had been with him when she initially went missing. The documentary is not without its criticisms, even from those who starred in it, but it does give viewers some compelling information. Even if no politicians were involved, it appears that law enforcement's efforts to find the murderer of a 6-year-old girl were severely lacking. Other suspects in Mary's case are few and far between. In 2014, a man named Madelin McCann, who had been jailed for 2 years for several sex offenses just a few years before, was pulled in for questioning but later released without charge. He has publicly denied any involvement with the 6-year-old's disappearance. Another man who was considered a suspect for a time was the infamous Scottish serial killer and pedophile Robert Black. He was thought to have been involved when authorities discovered that he was a cross-border truck driver who, as part of his job, often visited that same county from which Mary vanished. He was even known to have been in the area at the time of her disappearance. One witness even claimed they heard crying coming from the back of his van, which was parked outside of a pub in the village of Anagri. However, he has since been dismissed as a suspect. Mary's case, according to The Garter, is not cold, although the family have little faith in law enforcement and don't believe they will ever see justice. In 2018, a silent protest was held outside the coroner's office in the town of Stranola. Participants aimed to force the coroner to hold an inquest into Mary's disappearance, allowing key witnesses to be interviewed on the public record for the first time. Protesters also handed in a petition with 10,000 signatures demanding an inquest be held. This does not appear to have been successful, however. There are claims that Mary's mother has continually denied any inquests into the 6-year-old's disappearance. There are many theories in Mary's case. Most believe that Jerry Gallagher was involved and that O'Doherty's cover-up theory is truthful. Others have pointed to the suspicious actions of Mary's mother and suggested that the parents helped cover up the crime in some way. It's also been postulated that the 6-year-old was involved in an accident, but nobody wanted to admit it, or that perhaps Mary never even left the cottage at all, suggesting she was killed in the home. Mary's father passed away in a fishing accident in 2005. The rest of the family remains split by their opinions on what really happened to the little girl. To this day, her case is still unsolved. And there you have the facts.
Beth McCann was an energetic, innocent, and heartwarming young girl. Her unfulfilled childhood and endless potential to grow into an inspiring, creative, and world-impacting woman was cut short by an unexplainable, untraceable vanishing on May 3, 2007, leaving all who knew her in person and eventually both the entire United Kingdom and surrounding countries grasping for answers in a sea of evidence that drowned us all in doubt. As a hope to provide more substantial reasoning built upon observable evidence and situational analysis, this is an examination of the disappearance of Madelin McCann and the mystery at Little Britain in the village of Pride Lewis, Portugal. Madelin McCann was born on May 12, 2003 in Leicester, England to parents Kate and Jerry McCann. Kate and Jerry were Roman Catholic physicians and a loving pair meeting in Glasgow in 1993 before marrying 5 years later in 1998. It would be another half-decade before the couple bore a child and introduced Madelin to the world 2 years before having 2 more children, a set of twins Sean and Emily in 2005. Madelin, along with her younger brother and sister, formed a beautiful kinship with their parents and often traveled around the world on vacations and seeing the sights are in Europe. Both Kate and Jerry would later describe the mechanic plan as the perfect nuclear family of 5. Madelin's parents described her as vivacious, a lively young girl and lovingly extroverted. She was a ringleader amongst her infant siblings and fellow toddlers, never missing an opportunity to extend impressive social skills and communicating with those who gave her attention. Madelin's openness usually developed into an uncanny humor that's only an innocent, bright child cocooned. They said her ability to express herself, unveil her imagination, and communicate with her feelings was second to none. Madelin's burst of energy inspired her to enact role-playing and forming miniature stories with playmates, creating a strong bond as she related so easily to other children. However, the never-ending drive and the little ray of sunshine often wore out her parents, constantly needing attention from the people in the room she occupied. In fact, Madelin's youth was accompanied by hardships just as much as the positive bits. Kate and Jerry claimed the first 6 months of Madelin life were very difficult and that she had suffered from college. She cried practically for 18 hours a day. We had to permanently carry her around. Colic is an infamous illness found in babies, causing severe abdominal pain and intestinal blockage. The cries then transformed into screams after Kate gave birth to twins. Again, her parents explained that Madelin would run up and down in the background while Kate attended to the newborn babies. This hysteric hyperactivity would later prove a trait found in all the McCann siblings, but never broke up the unconditional happiness felt between the family members. Friends and family of the McCann offered similar sentiments as well. They all witnessed firsthand Madelin's brilliance and social inclinations while also noticing her protective nature towards her two siblings, often mothering them when their parents were out. In fact, some associates of the Macans believe Madelin and her siblings' camaraderie stopped at the presence of secluded strangers or an unknown group of people. However, because she knew how to engage even in foreign situations, relatives believed Madelin could get along with anyone if she was given the time. These careful observations and infinite effects of joy surrounded Madelin all the way up until a vacation she and her family took to Praia da Luz in the Algarve region of Portugal, settling in a well-known tourist town for British holiday makers. The McCann family quickly linked up with fellow doctors and assorted friends also vacationing in the area starting on Saturday, April the 28th, 2007. Kate, Jerry, Madelin, and the twin youngsters were having a wonderful time on one of their many frequent trips, and all the good times seemed destined for picture books. That is until the night of May the 3rd, 2007, barely a week before Madelin's 4th birthday. Kate and Jerry went out for dinner only to return to their flat and find missing their resilient and radiant daughter because sometime between 8:30 and 10 p.m., Madelin McCann disappeared without a trace, leaving a void in the hearts of not just his family, but in the hearts of people around the world. Launching an exhaustive search that would soon evolve into the most discussed missing persons tragedy of the 21st century. On April the 28th, 2007, the McCann family travels to Praia da Luz, Portugal for a 7-day spring break getaway. The 1,000-person village is nicknamed Little Britain for the vast amount of UK travelers staying in the area. The Maccans retreat to 5A Rua Drive, Agostinho de Silva, a flat owned by a retired teacher from Liverpool. Throughout the next week, the McCann family dines with 7 other friends and 5 fellow children. The adults, known as the Tapas 7, consisted of Fiona and David Payne, Diane Webster, James Tanner, Russell O'Brien, and Matthew and Rachel Oldfield. All of the men worked together over the years and their respective families all got along wonderfully. On day 6 of the vacation, May the 3rd, 2007, Madelin and her twin siblings hang out to the Ocean Club's Kids Club at the Praia da Luz resort, while her parents go for a walk at around 10 a.m. During breakfast, Madelin asks her parents, "Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night?" An hour and a half later at 12:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry pick their children up from the Kids Club and have back at 5 before setting off for the swimming pool. At 2:29 p.m. that afternoon, Kate McCann snaps the last photograph taken of her daughter. At the resort poolside with the sun shining and Madelin smiling per usual between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. Madelin and her siblings return to the Kids Club and eat dinner together. At approximately 6 p.m., Kate brings her children back to 5 while Jerry attends a tennis lesson elsewhere at the resort. Around 6:30 p.m., Jerry sends Tapas 7 but David Payne back to the apartments to check on his wife and 3 children. When the tennis lesson ends at 7 p.m., Jerry returns to 5 and helps Kate put Madelin, Sean, and Emily to bed. Their bedroom is fastened next to the front door at the flat, and as a single window overlooking the car park and public street, the shutter is closed before the children fall asleep. Between 7:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry clean up from the day's activities and share a bottle of wine together before heading off to dinner. At around 8:35 p.m., The McCann couple is the first of the friend group to arrive at the resort Tapas restaurant, located just 160 feet away from the F5 apartment. They reserve a table overlooking their living quarters where the top of 5 could be seen. The resort staff leave a message in writing at the reservation is specific because the families have children sleeping back at the complex. 20 minutes pass by and a few more members of the Tapas 7 arrive at the restaurant at 8:55 p.m. As the friends begin their orders, Madelin McCann quickly returns to the apartment complex to check on his flat and alert the Payne family that everyone else is waiting on them. 10 minutes later at 9:05 p.m., Jerry heads back to 5A to check on his own children. He walks through the unlocked back patio doors to avoid using the locked front door and potentially awakening the sleeping youngsters like they had been doing all week. Everything inside seems normal until he finds the children's bedroom door to be open about 45 degrees instead of just ajar. Suspicious, Jerry peers his head in, but finds all 3 siblings fast asleep and accounted for. He closes the door bag at 5 degrees, uses the toilet, and departs. This is the last confirmed sighting of Madelin McCann. A few minutes pass by and Jerry stops to speak with a friend and fellow holiday maker Jeremy Wilkins at 9:08 p.m. on the road near the Tapas restaurant. Throughout the next hour or so, members of the Tapas 7 swap turns going back to their apartment complex and checking in on their respective children. At 9:10 p.m., Jane Tanner walks up the road to her flat and passes by Jerry and Jeremy Wilkins without their notice. On her way, she sees a man walking across the path ahead of her, carrying a sleeping young girl wearing pink pajamas in his arms. It's a peculiar sight but not uncommon to a resort with many families. Tana finds her daughter safe in her room and returns to the restaurant. A little later at 9:30 p.m., Kate gets up to check in on 5 once more, but fellow Tapas 7 friend Oldfield offers to do it instead while he keeps an eye on his own family. Kate agrees and Matt travels to the McCann's apartment. Inside, he finds the door to the children's room open again, but to him, it means nothing. Instead, he pops his head in the door quickly and sees the twins sleeping in their respective cribs. From this vantage point, he doesn't explicitly notice Madelin and leaves the quiet building assuming all is perfectly normal. A half hour passes by and Kate makes another 5 checker south at 10 p.m. However, when she goes to push the children's door open, a draft of wind from inside the room slams the door shut. Kate enters with force and finds the window open and the shutter pulled up. The twins sleep soundly in their beds, but Madelin is nowhere to be found. Minutes later, Rachel Oldfield rushes to find fellow Tapas 7 member Jane Tanner in her apartment and relays the news of missing Madelin. Jane immediately calls back to her sighting and explains, "Oh my God, I saw a man carrying a girl." Matthew Oldfield then travels to the 24-hour reception desk at the bottom of the resort's hill to alert them of the disappearance. An alarm is raised and police are called at 10:15 p.m. 15 minutes pass before the local authorities arrive at Flat 5A, along with the police. Around 60 staff members and assorted guests search the grounds for Madelin. An exhaustive hunt that lasts until 4:30 the following morning at 11:10 p.m. Special investigators from the police judiciary ventured to the scene and discovered the sliding glass door that was found open by Kate McCann as a lock. Both Kate and Jerry are unsure if they actually locked it at the beginning of the vacation. While resort employees unveil that the cleaning staff will often open the sliding windows to air out department interiors. The special investigators are unable to confirm if this was the case. By the early morning hours of 2 a.m., patrol dogs are called in to keep an eye on the search efforts. 6 hours later at 8 a.m., 4 rescue dogs arrive to sniff the area around the resort and attempt to catch trail of Madelin at 5 a.m. beyond. At 10 a.m., the local police finally set up roadblocks to monitor traffic both coming and leaving the resort and surrounding routes. Over the next 24 hours, up to 20 strangers outside of the main investigators and family members interact with the 5 apartment, later proving to taint much of the evidence and cause headaches for future forensic work. In the coming days, police began interviewing anyone and everyone associated with the resort or simply living in the area. Kate and Jerry rented out another nearby home to stay close to the investigation. Throughout the next 11 to 12 years, a combination of Portuguese Police Scotland Yard, Macon Associates, private investigators, and public empathizers have yet to find one solid trace of Madelin McCann. Certainly. Here's the revised script with corrected grammar. After faulty DNA findings and tabloid exploitation, the case has entered a sphere unlike any missing persons tragedy before. Madelin's disappearance changed the world to the point that many UK citizens and people close to the case define society as either before Madelin vanished or after Madelin vanished. Regardless of cultural impact or giving value to the importance of one case over another, one thing is certain. Until she is found, we must continue evaluating all theories, evidence, and tips. Until Madelin comes home or her fate is justifiably understood, and there are some major case points we need to examine. From the beginning of the search for Madelin McCann, investigators knew that pinpointing suspects, or what the Portuguese classified as aguidos, would be daunting, as the location of the disappearance happened to be a busy hotspot for tourists, residents, and complete strangers who came and went each day. Specifically, the late spring vacation season was ripe with faces both old and fresh, meaning the early list of aguidos would stretch to impossible numbers. Anyone could be guilty while everybody was innocent at the same time. They dashed at the catch-22. Luckily for the police, Jane Tanner recalled her peculiar incident from the evening of May the 3rd sooner rather than later. Her sighting of a man carrying a young girl away from the McCann apartment complex would become the focal point of the early investigation and remain as the major case point in the eyes of the public following for almost 6 years. However, its importance isn't grounded by what it unveiled to authorities. Rather, grounded by what it distracted authorities from considering. It took up more than a decade of the precious moments spent looking for Madeline. Dubbed the Tanner sighting, Jane Tanner's testimony gave the first possible timeline of Madelin's suspected abduction. As mentioned previously, Jane had traveled from the Tapas restaurant back to her flat to check in on her children at around 9:10 p.m. She walked down the road, passed by Jerry McCann as he spoke with a fellow vacationer, and headed into the complex. Both Jerry and the second man would later say they couldn't remember seeing Jane walk by them that evening. And due to the confines of the narrow street, police initially believed Jane to be fabricating the entire ordeal. Yet Jane stuck by her following claims and highlighted that while Jerry and the vacation didn't confirm her movements, they couldn't deny them either. A few minutes of walking later, and Jane witnesses an older man with what appears to be a toddler in his arms. She says he was crossing the junction of Francisco Gentle Martins and Rua Drive, Augusto da Silva, moving east and away from the corner of 5A, where the Macon children's bedroom was located. His direction was first determined as suspicious as he was supposedly walking in the direction of Robert Murat's residence, a 34-year-old Portuguese suspect early on in the hunt. Jane Tanner described the unidentified man as a white male standing at about 5 feet 7 inches with dark hair and complexion that would indicate European or Mediterranean descent. He seemed to be 35 to 40 years old from a distance, wearing beige pants, a dark jacket, and the demeanor of a local. The girl he was carrying was wearing pink and floral pajamas cuffed at the legs, much like Madelin was wearing. These descriptions were curiously withheld from media until May the 25th, 3 weeks after the disappearance. A few months later, in October 2007, money from a fund set up by the McCann family was used for a forensic artist to recreate a simulated sketching of the Tanner sighting. The result is now one of the most famous images associated with Madelin's case. Sadly, the intensive search for the man from the Tanner sighting turned out to be a 6-year red herring chase. In October of 2013, Scotland Yard finally identified a British holiday maker who matched the TS description and fully corroborated with police. He explained that he was indeed carrying his own daughter after picking her up from the Ocean Club and heading back to their flat. To prove his innocence, The identified man dressed up in the same clothes as was mentioned in a TS report, and visually to the specific profile detailed in the sketch. The man was also able to provide the clothes his daughter was wearing the night of the sighting, as well, and once again the alibi cleared when the unveiled pajamas bore a likeness to Madelin's Yorset but was, in fact, different. What frustrated authorities the most with the Italian sighting wasn't the lack of information it provided, but rather the time it took away from other potential pieces of evidence, an eyewitness testimony that would later prove vital. First off, the Tana sighting led investigators to believe the main abduction took place between 9 and 9:15 p.m., which they based their impending reports on. However, after learning the town of sighting had little to no connection, they had to retrace their steps and recalibrate more than half a decade's worth of thinking. Thus, Scotland Yard turned their attention to another eerily similar sighting from the night of May 3, 2007. This incident reported by Irish holiday makers Martin and Mary Smith. The Smiths claimed that they saw a man carrying another child at about 10 p.m. in a location which was about 460 meters away from the Macans in 5A. The Smith sighting man was walking away from the Ocean Club and nearing the beach at Rua 25 Diabril. The Smiths described the new figure as a male standing at about 5 feet 8 inches with shorter brown hair and a slim build. He seemed to be in his mid-30s from the Smiths' vantage point and wore beige shorts. Much like how Jane Tanner described the man in her sighting as not a tourist. The Smiths offered the same testament, going as far as to say the man seemed uncomfortable carrying the child. The girl he was carrying had blonde hair, pale skin, bare feet, and was wearing lighter-colored pajamas, again like what Madelin was wearing. E-fit images were initially created back in 2008 when the testimony was first recorded, but the entire sightseeing was muddied when Martin Smith thought Jerry McCann fit the profile of the Smith sighting man. Oakley International private investigators were quick to strike down the possibility since Jerry had been confirmed at the Tapas restaurant at 10 p.m., but the rumored confusion created sensitive press about the Smiths' side. It wasn't until October of 2013 that it reverted law enforcement's attention and reset the timeline to the abduction happening just before the Smiths' sight. While the Tana sighting ended in lost time, it's sadly a common thread found in many missing persons cases and criminal investigations overall, where a lead seems revolutionary, yet can take years only to find it with a dead end. Regardless of results, the sightings are also proof of just how vast the spider web of possibilities is with Madelin's disappearance, and the preceding searches and how one simple memory or visual can spawn thousands of theories that send everyone involved spinning in circles. One of the early theories cultivated by Portuguese investigators actually considered Kate and Jerry McCann as suspects. The base of the claim was built by supposed DNA evidence found by cadaver dogs inside the family's rental car after Madelin's disappearance, as well as DNA matching hers discovered behind the couch in the 5A apartment. This led police to draft a 10-page conclusionary report including wild ideas regarding a likely murder of Madelin, a cover-up fake abduction that involved the Tapas 7 as conspirators to mislead police, and even a claim that the number of suitcases each member of the party brought to Portugal was suspicious in nature. Realistically, none of the theories made sense or had conclusive evidence to back them up. The DNA found in the car and in the flat were tested using DNA methods, and it was stated in the forensic reports that despite the matches to Madelin's DNA, the sample sizes were simply too small to consider credible. Not to mention the hours upon hours spent questioning the Wacken couple and their friends, who all cooperated fully and dedicated their testimony to truth and hope for Madelin's fate. In fact, almost as soon as the disappearance was reported, Kate set up a project called Madelin's Fund, Leaving No Stone Unturned Limited, which immediately caught fire across the UK and raised thousands of dollars to help hire private investigators and allocate resources directly to spreading awareness. Unfortunately, the early consideration of the McCann couple as Guidos fostered a tabloid firestorm that ended with lawsuits, deformation hearings, an unnecessary backlash that has turned a lot of the conversation around Madelin's disappearance to gossip and unsubstantiated finger-pointing. Because Kate and Jerry were soon relieved of suspicion after these reports were filed. They have since been 100% cleared by the current authority. There is no reason to consider their involvement as a realistic or plausible hypothesis and will not be considered any further. Another early theory proposed by investigators was a burglary gone wrong. According to records, the time between January and May of 2007 saw an unnatural rise in burglaries and burglary attempts in the area, including 2 around the McCann's apartment in the 17 days leading up to their vacation. These reports suggested that a burglary went into place the evening of May the 3rd, of which Madelin interrupted after climbing out of bed and exiting a bedroom, hence why the doors opened further than Gary had left it. Then the burglar would have taken Madelin as a precaution, leaving through the bedroom window since it faced the street outside the resort. In April of 2017, Scotland Yard announced a foiled burglary attempt was no longer under consideration. After they had interviewed potential thieves in the area and other potential suspects, but found no evidence. While the theory wasn't completely ruled out, their focus would turn to other ideas. A third positioned by investigators but quickly disregarded is that Madelin wandered out of a bedroom on her own accord and was taken by a passerby or fell into a construction zone nearby. These musings were first discounted by Kate McCann, who reminded police that Madelin would have had to open the patio doors on her own, close the blinds behind her, remember to shut the door again, operate the child-proof gate at the top of the stairs, and finally open and close the gate at the street level, all while being a 3-year-old toddler and unseen by resort members. It's also regarded unlikely that Madelin climbed out of the bedroom window under her own power as well. The most agreed upon theory by private investigators and law enforcement is one of abduction, including pre-planned abduction. This theory stems from the bevy of suspects seen around the 5A apartment complex in the days leading up to Madelin's disappearance, looking suspicious or acting out of a normal manner, possibly carrying out reconnaissance for a bigger operation. For years, police have been tracking down these suspicious men, as well as known pedophiles, bogus charity collectors, and criminals who were later convicted of similar crimes and could be placed in or around the area in May of 2007. In the end, the unbelievable amount of press and scrutiny this case has received from various experts and media channels all across the world have bloated websites, editorials, and blog posts with both theories and conspiracies. Some crime scene experts who have taken a dive into Madelin's disappearance have stated that they do not believe the scene backs up an abduction hypothesis and believe Madelin was murdered. Other followers call the police work in the case as nothing more than hunches, reminding us that the treatment of the 5A apartment was so improperly handled that no evidence or forensic examination could be carried out and tainted. At least 20 different people went in and out of the room on May the 3rd. 2007 before it was taped off. Killer testing wasn't carried out for months, allowing new vacationers to rent the apartment from the resort before it was locked down by police again. This coincided with constant bickering back and forth between Portuguese police and investigators from the UK, where tensions were rather high after numerous law enforcement entities made their way to Portugal and interrupted the search. To top it all off, the tabloid interference and age of media bombardment against the McCanns skewed public perception and hindered authorities to go about their duties without incredible tension waiting around the corner. With the vast amount of possibilities, no theory can accurately be concluded as the answer. Authorities have released tens of thousands of documents and translated almost every single one of them. They've investigated over 8,000 claimed sightings of Madelin and had counted, in 2015, that they took almost 1,400 statements, collected over 1,000 exhibits, investigated 650 sex offenders and 60 persons of interest, not counting the next 4 years of research. As of today, Madelin's case has received €11,750,000 in funding. Yet there are still so many unknowns associated with Madelin's vanishing, and until they are resolved, and police release every document, report, and case file, we must wait for new leads to surface while doing our part in spreading awareness. But let's take a look at some of the suspects. One way we want to help divulge information is by sharing a list of suspects still wanted in the hunt for clues leading to Madelin due to the sensitivity attributed to the case and the unfortunate loss of time in the early years of the investigation. We won't be drawing our own hypothetical conclusion. Instead, highlighting critical police sketchings and efforts of people either acting suspiciously around the time of Madelin's disappearance, or who have raised red flags in a variety of situations around Europe. Firstly, we have an unidentified woman whose profile was released on August 2009. The woman in question was seen near Port Olympic Marina in Barcelona, Spain, on May 7, 2007, just 72 hours after Madelin disappeared. She appeared agitated, was nicely dressed but kept pacing up and down the street by Rue de la Gamba restaurant and bar. Two passing British men noticed the disturbed woman and decided to approach her. When one of the men, who wishes to remain anonymous, asked if everything was okay, the woman asked, "Are you here to deliver my new daughter?" No other details are known, but the British witnesses say that after their conversation, the woman had a colorful argument in Spanish with a local inside the neighboring pub. Again, no other details have surfaced except that the witness described the woman's accent to be of Australian qualities and appeared as an Australian Victoria Beckham lookalike. Next, we have an unidentified man who was spotted 3 different times by a fellow holidaymaker, Gail Cooper, who was in Praia de Luz on vacation from England. The first time she saw the man, he was walking in his lonesome under a heavy rainstorm along an abandoned beach on April 20th, 2007. Later the same day, the man with olive skin and shoulder-length hair knocked on Gail's door and pretended to be a charity collector, a popular con around the resort area during the spring of 2007. 2 days later, on April 22nd, Gail saw the man for a final time, hanging around a children's event sponsored by the Mark Warner Resort. Gail was called back to Portugal in 2008 to work with the detectives on recreating the man's likeness through 2 sketches. At first, the man was thought to be the same man whom James Tanner witnessed carrying a small child away from the apartments back on May 3rd. But when he was cleared, the long-haired man was confirmed as a separate individual. In 2010, private investigators showed clips they had filmed of a man from inland Portugal, doing labor outside of a white truck. Gail watched these unreleased clips and found that despite the lack of a mustache and lighter hair color, the recorded man was the same man from the Praia de Luz beaches in April of 2007. Similar stories compared to the previous men have been updated with police sketches as well. Again, other witnesses claimed to have interacted with fake charity workers in the area around the time Madelin vanished and gave descriptions that were translated to pictures of these 2 men. 2 other fair-haired men were also described to have been hanging near the McCann flat around May 3rd and were thought to be of Scandinavian, German, or Dutch heritage. Another pair of EFIT profiles were uncovered in old Portuguese police reports and subsequently unveiled to the public, again representing suspicious men appearing in the area. In addition, the Smith sighting evidence also resulted in 2 different EFIT creations for a man seen carrying a small child at 10 p.m. on May 3rd. Another mysterious encounter resulted in police sketches occurred 3 days after Madelin's disappearance but wasn't announced to the McCann family or the public for over a year until the eyewitness was approached by Mirror magazine. Annette, then 41 years old, made a call to Dutch police when she thought Madelin and an older Dutch couple walked in at an Amsterdam shop on May 6, 2007. According to Annette, the man was between 35 and 40 years old, with a mustache, dark skin, and spoke Portuguese. The woman he was with was a little older, maybe in her 40s, with brown hair and spoke French. Accompanying them was a little girl. The following are direct quotes from Annette in Mirror magazine, who said, "I'll never forget the girl. She had her hair in a ponytail, huge green-brown eyes, a pale face which showed no emotion. I didn't like the man. He didn't look like a nice person. I work in a party shop, So most people smile when they come in to buy things, but he didn't smile back at me when I smiled at him. He had no sparkle in his eyes. He was short with me and seemed angry. I got the feeling he didn't want me to interfere with him and the others. The woman was also peculiar, acting stressed and uncomfortable, Annette said. She tried to smile at me, but it was out of obligation, not from the heart. The whole way they reacted made a big impression on me. The man spoke in Portuguese. I know because I have Brazilian friends. The woman spoke in French while the little girl spoke English. It didn't seem like a real family. When the girl spoke, she allegedly mentioned, "My name is Maddie," followed by "She is not my mummy." They took me from my holiday. Anna later recalls thinking, "The woman told me she was in a station wagon, a larger car. Maybe they were going on a long journey because this woman spoke French." I immediately thought that they would go to Belgium or France. This would later connect the dots with early police theories that feared Madelin had been taken by a Belgian pedophile gang, followed by 3 separate sightings of Madelin lookalikes in Belgium after May the 6th. Because Anna wasn't 100% certain that there were any criminal acts associated with the encounter, she didn't report it to the police right away until a month later when she saw the Madelin McCann case discussed on television. The Dutch police created EFITS and sent it along to Portuguese police on June the 18th, 2007, but the info never made it to the McCann family. So when Anne heard that over a year later in the summer of 2008, the McCann family had no knowledge of her testimony, she took it upon herself to connect with the current British law enforcement covering the case and cycled back through her memories. Thus, the sketches of the French woman and Portuguese mustached man were created, leaving Anna fearful her testimony came too late and the potential lead lost in translation. Probably the most disturbing police sketch is that of the pockmarked man. The man in question was seen multiple times hanging around the McCann apartment by 3 separate witnesses, all in the time frame of the McCann's vacation. The first witness, a 12-year-old local girl who saw the pockmarked man outside the balcony of 5A at 8:15 a.m. on April 30th. In her own words, the girl said, "I was walking to the school bus stop. I go this way to school every day. I saw a man on the small path behind the block. He seemed to be looking at the balcony of the ground floor apartment. My grandparents used to live in that apartment, so I always look at it as I pass by." A few days later, on May the 2nd, the day before Madelin disappeared, the girls saw the same man looking at the McCann flat again around lunchtime. The second witness was a female British tourist who recorded the following. "I saw a man acting suspiciously on 2 occasions. The first time I saw him, I was walking along the road with my daughter. I grabbed my daughter's hand and pulled her towards me because, for some reason, the man unnerved me. The next time I saw him, he was standing on the opposite side of the apartment. He was watching it. I would describe him as very ugly with pitted skin and a large nose." The third witness, a man from Cheshire, was walking with his partner at 11:30 a.m. along the road by 5A, but couldn't remember if it was May the 2nd or 3rd. He said, "I saw a man standing next to a wall on the opposite side of the road was a white van. I paid particular attention to him because he appeared to be focused on watching the apartment block. As I walked past him, I looked at him, and for a split second, we had eye contact. But then he just carried on staring at the apartment." All 3 sightings have incredibly creepy backstories to them, and truly send shivers down the spine when inspecting the man's sketch. If Madelin's abduction was pre-planned, finding the figure who was seen multiple times by multiple people, analyzing the McCann's living quarters could lead to valuable information. If the man in these testimonies or any of the presented drawings rings a bell at all, please speak up and say something. Even though it's been almost 12 years since that tragic night in Praia da Luz, we must remain diligent in our pursuit of Madelin's captor or anyone who might be involved. We'd love to make detailed videos about a single possible suspect, but there are so many involved it pains us to leave out smaller players who could still have a big role. We recommend everyone who's interested in the case to research the other persons of interest, and we have provided some useful links in the description. Madelin wasn't just a ray of sunshine, but also a child constantly absorbing knowledge with the potential to grow into a gifted and gracious human being. She was stripped of that opportunity, but the chance to rekindle her spirit isn't gone forever. There are still zero signs or clues provided that would lead investigators to think she is deceased, and until we find evidence that suggests otherwise, we must act as if her heart still beats somewhere out in the world. Whether it's in Europe or elsewhere, Madelin's will to survive does not go away with time past. Her energetic soul and compassionate heart deserve our attention, our grace, and our utmost determination. The little girl who loved to communicate, display her affection for family, and find the beauty in all that entered her youthful, innocent life needs our help. And we'd be defying our duty as fellow dreamers of the human race if we didn't pour our faith into the efforts of finding Madelin McCann or direct evidence that leads to someone who knows of her fate. Rico Omar Harris, known to the world of basketball, and all who followed his career as simply Rico, was an extroverted athletic, one-time world-renowned basketball prodigy. His energetic, entertaining skill set followed by a courageous battle against addiction and apparent recovery was cut short by an unexplainable, untraceable vanishing in October of 2014, leaving all who knew him, from college basketball fans in Los Angeles to the Harlem Globetrotters, grasping for answers in a sea of evidence that drowned us all in doubt. Rico Harris was born on May 19, 1977, to parents Henry Harris and Margaret Fernandez in Los Angeles, California. After moving to Oregon for a little while to account for Henry's new job, the Harris family quickly bonded with one another but moved back to Los Angeles soon after to raise 3 additional children. During their younger years, the Harris siblings were subjected to violent and abusive tendencies at the hands of their father. Rico specifically was a frequent target of Henry's rage, taking the brunt of his abuse, despite desperately seeking out his approval as he grew into a teenager. Henry's collision course eventually drove Margaret away, and she took her children with her to Alhambra, California. Rico, the eldest brother, took it upon himself to help support the family, and while Margaret would work full-time, he watched over his siblings. While his parents urged him to use his big body frame in sports, Rico decided to pursue basketball at age 15. To improve his chances of finding success, he enrolled in Hollywood High School, a headache of a drive all the way from Alhambra. However, these aspirations only lasted a year before Rico realized he was born to play basketball and used his father's address to attend Temple City High School. By the time he was 16 years old, Rico was already 6 feet 8 inches tall and 250 pounds, a colossal young man. It didn't take long for him to take control of the basketball court, dominating his opponents and entertaining the crowds with his explosive style of play. He transformed a once-dormant high school club into a powerhouse program, drawing in college scouts as he reflected the style of Magic Johnson and broke through double-team defenses. Off the court, he was an introverted adolescent without much academic prowess. Until he met a girlfriend whose family helped him achieve higher grades in school. This helped Rico find even more success in basketball, and during his senior season, he averaged 28 points, 15 rebounds, and was compared to top basketball recruits in the western United States, such as Jason Terry and Paul Pierce. Sadly, because Rico failed to receive high marks on the SAT, his scholarship offers from top-flight universities such as UCLA were rescinded. Thus, Rico ended up at Arizona State to take classes before regaining eligibility to play basketball. For the first time in his life, Rico was away from friends and his close-knit family, and it caused struggles in his studies and his social life. In March of 1996, he was briefly accused of unlawful imprisonment along with 2 other teammates. But the charges were dropped, and Rico was told he had to sit out a second sports season to clean up his act. Refusing to sacrifice additional precious time, Rico transferred to Los Angeles City College. He was able to join the basketball team and immediately let his presence be known. He guided the LACC club to a state title and won Most Valuable Player. But by his second year, Rico found himself in academic decline and trending towards an unhealthy lifestyle, constantly consuming alcohol despite still performing at a high level on the basketball court. When he lost connection to his former girlfriend and acknowledged his deteriorating emotional health, Rico shut down his recruitment from other colleges, fearing they only wanted his skills rather than his personal development, and declared for the NBA draft. Once again, this plan went up in flames when Rico kept pushing off special events to showcase his skills in order to remain close to home. As a byproduct, he withdrew his name from draft consideration, declining various college offers to play Division I college ball, and transferred to Cal State Northridge. Many thought it was a poor choice for Rico's future career, and the doubters were unfortunately correct. Over the summer between semesters, Rico attempted to reconcile with his estranged father Henry, but was swiftly rejected. Caught in the purgatory of social and emotional negligence, Rico continued to lose focus and lost interest from the NBA during his only lackluster season at CSUN. As per NCAA eligibility, Rico turned to semi-professional basketball to keep his NBA dream alive. He played in San Diego, St. Louis, and other pickup teams before deciding to join the Harlem Globetrotters, a comedic exhibition basketball team. In a tragic twist, Rico found himself in a scuffle in South LA 1 month into the Globetrotters gig, in which he was hit in the back of his head by a baseball bat. While he survived, Rico suffered from balance issues and headaches thereafter, effectively ending his basketball career. After moving back to Alhambra with his mother and siblings, Rico entered a 7-year stretch of battling addiction that started with alcohol and exploded into heroin, meth, and cocaine. In fact, all of the Harris siblings were suffering from some version of substance abuse, and then Mother Margaret did everything she could to help them with their demons. After Rico turned 30 years old in 2007, he finally sought true help and entered rehab. The program lasted longer than normal, but in the end, Rico recovered from his addiction. In 2012, he met Jennifer Song, a Seattle insurance broker, and the two entered a romantic relationship. Throughout the next couple of years, Jennifer and Rico became very close. Rico eventually moved to Seattle permanently and started planning a life with Jennifer as a married couple. The two talked about having children and setting up a happy future. Rico even lined up a job interview as a property appraiser, an incredible opportunity considering all he had to overcome. However, before Rico could make the final transformation, he had to go back home to Alhambra one more time to find closure with his family. He arrived on October the 9th, 2014, and had dinner with his brother, gifting him a new cell phone. Rico then visited his mother, engaging in a one-on-one private conversation. Whatever resulted in the exchange is unknown, but it's believed to have been against Rico's wishes. Rico left for Seattle again just after midnight and stopped in Lodi, California for gas. He drove all night and in the morning called Jennifer to let her know he was going up into the mountains to rest. It was the final point of contact anyone made with Rico Harris, and he soon disappeared into the North Sacramento wilderness. In early September of 2014, Rico and his girlfriend, Jennifer, enjoyed their intimate, hopeful relationship with one another and began to think about the future together. However, Jennifer noticed something off with Rico, who acted abnormally and lost his sense of organization. After she persisted in questioning him, Rico revealed he lapsed the previous summer of 2014 with alcohol consumption. While it hadn't turned back into a habit, the return to an old threw Jennifer off balance. Rico's relapse is confirmed by longtime friend David Lara, who had rekindled their friendship around the same time. Later in September, despite the earlier friction, Rico and Jennifer settled on taking their relationship a step further and moving together in Seattle, Washington. It's seen as a monumental endeavor for Rico, who previously struggled, went away from his hometown of Los Angeles, and close-knit family. The couple engaged in intense conversations about marriage, having children, and exploring true love, yet Rico still felt insecure about the new surroundings. It took him almost a month to unpack, as Rico felt awkward making himself at home in a living space that wasn't his own. Jennifer later says it was Rico's sensitive underlying will to provide for loved ones that fed the insecurity, and not lingering second thoughts or laziness. Within the first week of October, things changed for the better. Rico secured a job interview for a position as a property appraiser at a local real estate company. The new opportunity sparked joy and encouragement, and Rico finally unpacked his belongings in Jennifer's house, a signal he was ready for change and was there to stay in Seattle. The happy eyes shifted unexpectedly on October the 8th, 2014, when Rico told Jennifer he was going out later in the day to explore, a bit strange compared to Rico's usual activity. Yet Jennifer didn't think twice about it and kissed her fiancé goodbye. But when Jennifer calls Rico later in the evening of October the 8th, Rico informs her that he's on his way to Los Angeles to visit with his family. Rico explains that he wants closure from the dark past of his childhood and to create trust with his mother again regarding their relationship and his future. Jennifer, while taken aback, understands his well-meanings and supports his quick decision. Jennifer remembers Rico sounding excited to move on, his head seemingly in the right space. Rico arrives in Alhambra the next day on October the 9th. His mother, Margaret, notes his excitement about the recent changes and ultimately about his flourishing life. However, Margaret also suspects Rico to have been drinking or under the influence of a substance. In the evening of October the 9th, Rico leaves his mother's house and has dinner with one of his younger brothers. He buys his brother a new cell phone, and the two reminisce of old times. After the brothers' rekindling, Rico heads back to Margaret's house in Alhambra to engage in a private conversation and again seek the closure he desires from a tattered childhood. The conversation does not last long, and Margaret later claims she felt Rico hadn't taken from the conversation what he had hoped for in terms of emotional revelation. Not long after the clock strikes midnight on Friday, October the 10th, Rico decides to head back to Seattle rather than spending the night like his mother expected. In order to have extra prep time for his interview, he takes a few extra personal belongings from his mother's home and hits the road. At around 1 o'clock, Rico calls his mother again to explain his rash decision. Margaret recalls her son saying something along the lines of, "I have these things that I need to do." Right after talking to his mother, Rico then calls Jennifer once again, surprising her with the premature return home. The couple talks for 3 to 4 hours, throughout which Jennifer encourages Rico to find a motel and sleep, considering he had been awake for 40+ hours. Rico finally comes around but expresses the desire to drive up to the nearby mountains for a quick nap. Jennifer suggests an alternative, reminding him he'd have no cell service at high altitude, and the dark winding roads would be dangerous in the thick of night. The two end their phone call with Rico still set on driving. At 8 a.m. on October the 10th, Rico receives a second call from Jennifer after she slept for a few hours. Rico informs her that he's getting gas at a station near Sacramento in a town called Lodi, California. He sounds incredibly tired from his end of the phone. An hour or so later, Rico was contacted again, this time by his mother, wondering about his progress. Rico finally admits to his exhaustion and claims he's going to find somewhere to rest and eat throughout the morning. Both Jennifer and Margaret make multiple calls to Rico to check in on his resting plans, but Rico never picks up. After a few unsuccessful tries, Jennifer sends him a text. At 10:44 a.m., Rico finally responds to Jennifer's text and says he is doing well but gives little details. This is the last official contact anyone makes with Rico Harris. As morning shifts to the afternoon, Jennifer tries to let Rico's rest time go uninterrupted. Yet her anxieties get the best of her, and she calls him anyway, still getting no response. Jennifer tells herself he must still be in the mountainous region of California, and the cell service is playing a role. Between 7 and 8 p.m., Jennifer officially falls under the silence of Rico and calls Margaret to worry. Margaret, on the other hand, is calm and guesses Rico is just operating on his own will, not uncommon to his personality. Sometime before midnight, Rico records himself singing along to in his parked car but appears to be doing so unintentionally. He also throws around various CDs from the passenger compartment as well. These video clips are later found to be timestamped on the evening of October the 10th, confirming he was alive and functioning at that time. At 11:15, Rico's cell phone turns off. Whether it was by Rico himself or due to battery failure is unknown. The weekend of October 11th and 12th goes by, and Rico never returned any calls or returns to Seattle. Yet Jennifer and Margaret hold off on reporting it, remembering he won't escape to San Diego for a few hours without notice and give him a couple of days to reappear. On Monday, October the 13th, a Yolo County deputy sheriff makes a routine check of an isolated rest area parking lot at Rumsey Canyon in Ramsey, California, along California State Route 16. He finds a black Nissan Maxima off to the side in the dirt lot with no nearby passengers but lets it be. The following day on Tuesday, October the 14th, the same Yolo County sheriff returns to his route and finds the Nissan in the same spot in the parking lot. He runs the plate in his database and discovers it belongs to Rico Harris, his address still linked in Alhambra. The Yolo County Sheriff's Office calls Margaret to inform her they found the car but no person, and she then calls Jennifer, trying to make sense of what both women described as a surreal dream. Margaret officially files a missing persons report with the Alhambra Police Department, and law enforcement opens an investigation. Over the next week or so, they put together a vast network of searches and rescue personnel. Helicopters with thermographic cameras fly over the surrounding areas. All-terrain vehicles are commissioned for the mountainous search zone, and cadaver dogs are deployed to pick up any lingering scent of Rico. Overall, the crews covered a 5-mile radius of the parking lot and a 27-mile stretch of Ramsey Canyon, along Route 16, but find little clues besides unidentified footprints in the dirt alongside the road. Using cell phone data, police interview residents of nearby locals and receive a few reassuring sightings dated back to Sunday, October 12th, but nothing concrete surfaces. On October the 19th, investigators receive another tip about the sighting of a large man walking along Route 16, and subsequent shoe prints are found in the dirt once again. However, the location of the previous eyewitness testimony and footprints compared to the October 19th clues lead police to conclude Rico had left the site of his car at Ramsey Canyon, walked along the Cache Creek, and then returned to the original spot for unknown reasons. This revelation would provide the strongest foundation for later theories. A few days later, on October the 22nd, the search is pulled back and slowly dwindles down. In mid-November of 2014, divers returned to deeper sections of the surrounding bodies of water to record more searches, but again, find nothing of use or suspicion. Since the mid-October mystery, nobody has found credible evidence to lead police to answers or spark reasonable theories outside of speculation. Currently, we are only left with what was found in those few weeks of investigating, making the entire ordeal murky with dead ends and puzzle pieces without a home. In the case of the disappearance of Rico Harris, most of the tangible clues were discovered in the first week or so of searches. But none was more perplexing than the backpack and cell phone recovered on a guardrail along Route 16 near Cache Creek. After police assessed cell phone records from the provider company, data pings led them to the Redwood Valley area in Northern California, about 70 miles northwest from where Rico's vehicle was originally located. To cover all their bases, authorities called as many residents as they could in the surrounding communities, leaving messages on voicemails asking for tips. It didn't take long for the scheme to produce results when lead investigator Dean Island received a call from a Redwood Valley man who claimed to have found items belonging to Rico. Police immediately responded to the tip and learned that the Redwood man indeed had a black backpack owned by Rico Harris. Inside the backpack were jumper cables and his cell phone. The man explained that he, his wife, and their grandchild were driving along Route 16 when the young boy alerted his grandparents that the stray backpack was on the curb of the highway and alarmingly out of place amid the surroundings. The man pulled over, and the trio shouted into the wilderness to hopefully make contact with the bag's owner. When they found nobody down the creek, the Redwood family checked the bag for ID. All they found were the cables and phone, so they took it with them in hopes to charge it and contact someone. Law enforcement quickly assumed the backpack to be Rico's. Not only was the bag like a purse, according to Jennifer, who recognized the parcel instantly, but was also found only 1,500 feet from a sighting reported by a passerby earlier in the week, someone who had seen a large African-American man standing along the guardrail on Route 16. These inclinations were confirmed when the officers assessed the cell phone and combed through its information. Pulled from the phone would later prove to be crucial visual evidence in creating the timeline of Rico's last known actions. In his media gallery, Rico had videos of himself singing along to music in his car, seemingly ignorant of the fact that he was recording himself. Along with absent-minded singing, Rico was also seen throwing around CDs in the cabin, ripping up random papers, and playing with the sunroof controls. These clips were saved in the evening hours of October the 10th, meaning Rico was alive that night, and probably showcased the reason why the vehicle was out of gas and had a dead battery. The fact that Rico had been tossing items around in the car also helped explain why the car had originally appeared ransacked when investigators towed it into the station. Most importantly, however, the cell phone videos gave authorities a better idea about the state of mind Rico was in around the time he'd last made contact with his family. The fact that Rico recently relapsed with drug use was thought to have consumed alcohol while in Alhambra, engaged in difficult emotionally draining conversations with his family, and was awake for an estimated 50 hours straight would certainly lead to a fragile psyche. This combined with Rico's indecisive demeanor and lifetime's worth of personal struggles could have tripped him into madness, or at least extreme exhaustion. Without a doubt, the backpack, cell phone, and overall major case points show Rico was in trouble. And if not from a third party, then at least from his own beaten bat itself. The first and most popular theory discussed in the case of Rico Harris developed into a confusing speculative story of foul play. The hypothesis originated with the Yolo County Sheriff's Department after the Nissan was found abandoned and seemingly plundered. Besides the mess of papers, CDs, and bottles in the back seat, investigators also know Rico's wallet was left behind, still full of its contents, except for a Discovery credit card. On the exterior, the car wasn't parked in any of the marked parking slots, and had both no gas and the dead battery. Police calculated that after filling up with gas in Lodi, California, Rico took a wrong turn and headed northeast on Route 16. When he found the Cache Creek Park in Rumsey Khan, he pulled off to rest, released pent-up energy, and was eventually embattled with a third party to explain the defects of the car. Investigators guessed the gas must have been siphoned. This theory would also explain why a 6'8", 300-pound man could so easily slip through the cracks outside of a few potential sightings. Men of that size typically don't go away unnoticed unless another person or persons drive them away, or something far sinister. The foul play musings became much more obscure when Rico's backpack and footprints were discovered. Because the cell phone videos show Rico sitting in an idle car on October 10th, it's possible he ran out of gas and used the battery from extended periods of running both the engine and the audio system. Normal cars can run through 1.5 gallons of gas per hour just in the idle position. So it's in the realm of possibility that Rico let his car run through the night to the 10th and into the weekend of October the 11th and 12th. It would also help explain why the interior of the car was wrecked and why jumper cables were in Rico's possession. He was probably looking for someone to help jump his battery, meaning the footprints along Route 16 suggested Rico walked along the highway to flag down passers-by. There was also zero DNA findings to corroborate third-party interference or the presence of a stranger. So while Rico certainly didn't encounter foul play while in his car at Cache Creek, Investigators still theorize he met with trouble after hitchhiking along Route 16. They believe while walking and talking to anyone who would pull over to assist him, Rico was taken advantage of by someone or somebody with criminal intentions. It's very likely Rico was not in the right frame of mind that weekend, and if he came across as exhausted or groggy, his could easily persuade him to leave his backpack behind and get in the vehicle. It's a bit confusing as to why someone would risk dealing with a man who is almost guaranteed to have a physical advantage, not to mention no money on their person, but it's also worth remembering Rico relapsed shortly before his disappearance. And if he found someone who promised him drugs or other substances, how likely would he have been persuaded? Well, this figure could be ranges from a potential killer to a drug dealer to someone desperate for a man of Rico's stature. Unfortunately, there are hardly any leads or threats associated with the foul play theory besides combing through people with criminal backgrounds in the area. Due to the vast population of Northern California and the Sacramento area, the possibilities are borderline infinite. Another theory considered by many is that Rico was wounded and taken by a wild animal or large predator. Northern California has its fair share of wildlife, including combative creatures such as rattlesnakes, mountain lions, and black bears. A rattlesnake would certainly be able to bite and poison an unsuspecting human. But if Rico was in fact bit by a snake, his body would have been picked up by the air helicopters or numerous search parties. Black bears, while imposing animals, are in fact quite docile and do not interact with humans very often, let alone a large man the size of somebody like Rico. The only animal that makes sense is a mountain lion, yet it would take a considerably strong cougar or pack of cougars to kill Rico and then take his body into a dwelling cave or habitat hidden from humans. The search found no signs of struggle in the dusty expanse of Ramsey Canyon. And again, the mere size of Rico probably deterred wild animals from approaching. And if he did die somewhere in the wilderness, his body would not have tokayed into the ground and avoided visibility due to the timeline of the disappearance and impending manhunt. The third theory associated with Rico involved around a planned escape and manufactured disappearance. This conspiracy points to Rico's history with indecision and probable disappointment with the closure he sought when returning to Alhambra. Supporters of the story suggest that Rico realized in his return home he no longer wanted the life he hoped for in Seattle, and thought best to vanish without a trace and escape somewhere new. The theory points to the new cell phone Rico bought for his brother, highlighting that Rico could have bought a second phone that he used for his getaway, and that his brother helped him along the way. After the conversation with his mother went south, Rico decided to leave unnoticed, using his scheduled interview as an excuse. On the way to Sacramento, Rico slowly broke off contact his mother and girlfriend and veered off course from Interstate 5 to Seattle and drove east to Cache Creek. When he arrived, he recorded himself to appear distressed and potentially even stage a kidnapping or robbery. After the car finally ran out of gas and electricity, Rico walked off with his backpack and old phone, appearing to need help with the jumper cables. Instead, when Rico flagged down a car to hitchhike, he left the bag and cell phone find to create a diversion. Some goes far to say whoever picked him up was in on his plan, and a link to Rico's staged disappearance and his new life. In the end, this theory is rife with inconsistencies. Rico had been adamant to all he knew that the opportunities in Seattle were incredibly encouraging. He had recently become a resident of Washington State, constantly talked about marriage and fatherhood, and truly settled in with Jennifer. Police also tracked the missing Discovery credit card found missing from Rico's wallet, and the account was never assessed or operated at any time following October the 10th. Meaning that if Rico escaped, the funds he would most certainly need to execute such a scheme came elsewhere and not from personal wealth. Taking into consideration the skill and resourcefulness needed to pull off such a feat, the improbability of faking a mental collapse seen in the selfie videos, and coincidental contrast of Rico's recent attitudes towards life. The idea that Rico stays at his appearance and escape thereafter is highly implausible before we divulge our hypothesis of Rico's mysterious disappearance, we want to make known our conclusions presented in Cold Case Detective. Our purely logical speculation based on evidence, circumstance, and factual subtext. We are only privy to the same information presented in each video, and we do not attempt to promise certain or an expert guarantee on the findings we reach in the closing. We simply observe, research, and report. In this case, we believe Rico continued to relapse into substance abuse as a result of personal torment and extreme exhaustion. Found himself alone and free of scrutiny out in the wild after making a wrong turn on his journey and wandered into unknown territory where he most likely died hidden by the natural elements. All of his life, Rico dealt with the absence of a caring, nurturing father. Despite the physical and verbal abuse he sustained in his youth, Rico sought his father's approval and internalized his love for basketball. After he and his siblings moved in with their mother, Rico never quite broke off the relationship he had with Henry Harris. When Rico's basketball career fizzled out, and he turned to drugs and alcohol, Rico swelled the bubbling tension from a rough childhood. To make matters more complicated, Rico ran into his own father in jail after an arrest for public intoxication. These humiliations and unresolved conflicts took a psychological toll on Rico, leaving him with signs of undiagnosed depression, anxiety, and possibly bipolar disorder revealed by Jennifer after he disappeared. Taking a history of mental troubles into consideration, a relapse into substance use, and family or shortcomings would have put Rico in a very dark place on his drive back to Seattle after his attempts to tie knots on his past fell short, and failure created the wounds in his heart and mind to irreversible sizes. Thus, after staying awake for more than 2 consecutive days, the emotional instability caught up to Rico, and he ventured from the planned course. On his drive up north, he probably took a wrong turn that took him through the mountains of northern Sacramento and into Ramsey Canyon. Between the stop for gas in Lodi and parking in the lower side of Cache Creek Park, Rico found an outlet for drugs and alcohol and picked him up. Hard drugs are notoriously distributed throughout Sacramento and the surrounding regions, so it wouldn't be too tricky for a former addict to navigate and purchase. After he parked, Rico either consumed the drugs he had collected or experienced the side effects in full force. It's plausible he had taken either crack or methamphetamine throughout the trip anyways, stimulants that explain how he could stay awake and alert for so long. The drug reasoning comes from a vital clue found in the Nissan Shima after police towed the vehicle